Black Ibis Social Club, the podcast that discusses literature, art, culture, and really anything we want to talk about in a friendly, fun, intellectual environment. So today we have one of my favorite independent authors and friend, Lisa Kuznak. What's up, Lisa?
Not much. What's up with you?
Work, podcasting,
Hmm.
being awesome, doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, for you guys at home, you might notice that we're missing Fisto today because he's an asshole. No, he's busy. He has to go basically put his proposal out for the replacement to USAID so we can get some Trump Elon Musk dollars for our funding and trying to go big time. But no, he's actually got some personal stuff to handle. He was busy and he won't be here today, but I'm sure he's gonna listen and talk crap on us afterwards. Talk about
Yeah.
Lisa.
Yeah. For sure.
And you've been on the podcast. What, this is number 4?
I think it was the fourth time. Yeah.
It is awesome. You're
Yeah.
one of my favorite guests, and like I always want
Oh,
you
thank you. Thank you.
we got a lot of stuff to talk about pertaining to you specifically. But
Hmm.
before we do that, I kind of wanted to give listeners back home a little quick update. First of all, I wanted to apologize that we missed last week, right? We had Mr. Noah Reimer scheduled to come on, and I just did not feel good. I was feeling like complete ass, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to do a crappy episode. I didn't want to, push through and not be on my top game when it comes to conversation and questions. So I decided to reschedule. So we will have Noah Reimer back. I spent the entire day on the couch under a blanket playing Daisy instead of recording. So there's that. And also for listeners at home, this past weekend we released the first ever Black Ibis Film Club episode with my guest Judy on there, and we watched Lost in Translation, and I think it's a really good episode. I think it was like a long 3-hour episode. I think our podcast episode was longer than the actual movie by like 1.5 hours, but it's a great movie. We had a lot to talk about. Have you seen it, Lisa?
I actually haven't. And before you bite my head off, that's why I won't be able to really contribute to the film club convo because I haven't listened to that because I didn't want the movie spoiled because I haven't seen it yet.
Right.
So I'm going to listen to the podcast immediately after watching the movie.
Right. Well, it's a
Yeah.
great movie, one of the best movies, and in my opinion, probably the best movie that that was written and directed by a woman, and that's Sophia.
Yeah. Yeah. What year did it come out?
It was 2013 or 14. I had it written somewhere. Let me see.
I thought it was earlier than that because for some reason there must have been a really similar movie that came out when I was in film school,
Oh no,
and that
I
was
was.
around 2000.
I'm completely
Go ahead.
wrong. It has to be earlier than that because I was
It's way
already.
earlier than that. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was gonna say,
2003. I was way off. I was like off
yeah,
by a
okay.
decade.
That's because if it wasn't Lost in Translation that had come out, then it was a identical movie. But anyway, yeah. So that came out at kind of like the wrong time for me and my like, I don't know, movie watching tastes. Yeah, especially if it was 2003. I was too young, I think, for that. And then by the time I was in film school, there was so like if you actually like movies, fucking don't go to film school. You will never want to watch a movie again for
Well,
fucking
that's
years.
probably like don't go to don't study
Yeah.
English if you like reading and
Yeah,
writing,
yeah, yeah. Only
and
only do it if you're a complete masochist and you hate yourself. Um, so but anyway, whatever. I ended up dropping out of film school for those who aren't familiar with my film school story. I
yeah,
ended up dropping out anyway. But yeah, so there was a lot of movies that came out in that era that I guess I skipped, except for like the really big ones. Like 2007 was a huge year for movies.
yeah.
So I wasn't
What
skipping too many
what
movies that
came out
year.
in 2007?
Oh, No Country for Old Men, There Will Be Blood. Those are the
Oh
two ones
yeah,
in my head right
yeah.
away.
That was
2007 was actually really good.
probably the last great year, honestly, because you had, yeah,
Yeah.
No Country for Old Men, which I think it
I
won Best
think that's
Picture. Did it?
2007.
Did it
Yeah.
win
Hold
Best
on.
Picture? Maybe.
2007 best. Oh no, wait, I would 2008 best picture, right? Best picture.
It was either
My
that or There
Google
Will Be
foo here.
Blood. I know that one and There Will
Yeah.
Be Blood were like, but yeah, Pan's Labyrinth
Okay.
came out, which I hate now in retrospective. Um,
I'd like to watch that once my kids get a little bit older. Actually, my oldest is probably old enough to watch it, but he's not big on movies.
hmm,
I don't know where he gets that from. Not from me, anyway.
weird.
Yeah, freaking weird kid. Anyway, yeah, Best Picture, No Country for Old Men. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nominees. There Will Be Blood was a nominee,
and
or
I think,
most nominations for No Country, No Men, and There Will Be Blood.
and I think There Will Be Blood. He won the Best Actor for that movie.
I
I'm
think
pretty
you're
sure.
right too. I
And
could I could read this entire Wikipedia, but I am
yeah,
supposed to be being interviewed.
yeah, who cares, right?
So let's skip that.
Also, Ratatouille came out that year, and that was it's
Yeah,
still
I just saw that. Yeah,
my favorite
Ratatouille.
Pixar movie.
It's
And
really cute. Yeah, it's a cute one.
yeah, Zodiac came out that year. Man, it was a banger for movies. I, the what was it the movie that the year when Parasite won and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Ferrari came out, which was maybe four or
That's
5 years.
fairly recently.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was also
somewhat
like that
recently.
was like the last good year. This year it
It
was
comes and
just
goes. Yeah.
trash. Like it just a trash year. I don't think I've seen any of the movies that were up for any awards. The only movies I've seen this year that won any awards or were even considered were was well, I saw Nosferatu, which I know you didn't like, and I
Yeah,
thought it was
I'm like one
meh.
of the only people who did not like the movie. Okay, I won't say I didn't like it. There was a lot of things about Nosferatu that I liked. I really liked the Transylvania sections.
Yeah, it was the only good part of the movie.
Mm, yeah. Uh actually there was a couple scenes where as I was watching I'm like, "Oh, I hope Constantine sees this." Um just because I wanted to like pick your brain on like, you know,
Yeah.
but
I thought
yeah,
about doing an
my
episode on that, but I just don't want to do it because everybody else
yeah,
did already. And it's not that
everybody
great
else has done
it's
it.
not that
Yeah.
great of a movie, It's a mediocre movie. It's forgettable and there's nothing cool. Like I mean, and I was actually
This
thinking,
is why
why
go
didn't you
ahead.
like it? Go ahead. I want to hear why. I know why you didn't like it. You told me already, but I want to hear it for the
Yeah,
podcast.
I'm not going to spoil anything,
It's
but there was
Dracula,
some
guys.
aspect.
There's no spoilers.
It's
It's he's a vampire from Transylvania. He falls home and cucks the dude and then dies. That's how it goes.
well, okay. So because yeah, but specifically the way that Eggers handled the story, I don't want to really spoil his take on it, but yeah, I mean it is a vampire cuck film. But he fuck it. I'm just gonna spoil it because it's basically a vampire cuck film. He took the cuckening a little bit too far, in my
Right.
opinion. I slapped the arm of my chair in the theater when the credits were rolling. It just pissed me off so much. I really did not like. I know a lot of people were really, really into Lily Rose, whatever her name is, Depp's performance. I did not care for it at all. I
Neither
thought
did
it
I.
sucked ass.
I thought she was completely miscast, you know? And
Yeah, I don't know. I
the
don't know. It
reason I
was
think she
weird.
was miscast is because she did not look. She's too dark. Like she's too dark skinned or something for that. And okay, that just sounded really, prejudiced. Oh my God.
No, no, no. Um,
She looks like a gypsy, okay? And she's dark skinned. She looks like she'd belong in a scene at the gypsy like, tavern or whatever.
she
And
looked. She almost looked like because there was a scene in Transylvania with the gypsies,
right,
right?
that's exactly what I meant. She
She
looked
would
like
look
she
more at home there. Yeah.
yeah, which would make sense why, why Dracula or Orlok, right? Uh
Yeah. Whatever his
would
fucking name is.
creep on her. But the problem is that that character, the Mina Harker character, right,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
supposed to be this like virginal Germanic or Anglo, girl. Like
Whatever. Yeah.
what's her name in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, freaking Lydia,
Yeah.
what's her name?
Winona Ryder.
Winona Ryder. You know, she looked the part, even
Yeah.
though she's actually like, I think she's like ethnically Eastern European Jewish herself. But
Yeah.
she looked like a wafy like girl that would be the wife of some Anglo,
So
cuckold,
this
you
is
know?
why this is why despite her horrendous accent, Winona Ryder actually did suit the role. Okay, so my heritage, I have a lot of Hungarian, Romanian, Russian, that kind of area. And
Mhm.
actually my grandpa came from a tiny little village in what's now Transylvania, but I think before World War II was part of Hungary. Like he spoke Hungarian, but now it's part of Romania, whatever. Anyway, Winona Ryder and my sister could be twins.
Right,
And also, yeah, and that side of my family also has the Ashkenazi, whatever the hell. So that perfect like blend for casting. Yeah,
right,
Winona Ryder and my sister. I've always thought Winona Ryder looked not
right.
identical to my sister, but pretty close. Yeah.
And
So that's why I think she was casted really well.
she looks waifish and
Yeah.
vulnerable and not the kind of girl that would bang a vampire, right? Lily Rose Depp looks very Mediterranean. She's, I believe she's half French. I think her mom is French. And she looks Mediterranean and she looks very BPD. And she looks like the kind of girl that would bang a vampire. You know what I mean? Which is
Yeah, she
cool.
looks well. Speaking of Winona Ryder and my sister, like, do you remember the whole like kleptomania episode of
Hmm.
Winona Ryder's
Hmm.
like, yeah, so
Her
funny.
fall from grace before her
Yeah.
return to
Yeah.
fame with Stranger
So,
Things.
but what's really funny, yeah. So what's really funny about that is that she doesn't look like the type of person who would be a total kleptomaniac stealing shit.
Right.
But you're
But
right. Lily Rose Depp does look like the type who would she would totally go into frickin' uh
right.
I don't remember the store that Winona Ryder was stealing from. I don't think it really matters, but
Yeah, it was like some clothing store or something. I remember that. That
yeah.
was like a big deal. And I was like, "What's the big deal with that?" And I was like I was a young kid. Now
Yeah.
I'm a Winona Ryder fan. Okay, that was one of my. I think Winona Ryder
Yeah,
in
I've always
Beetlejuice
liked her. Yeah.
imprinted myself into my psychosexual personality to where that's what I like in women.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, her defining role is like her two defining early roles are Lydia in Beetlejuice and
Yeah.
the the girl in Edward Scissorhands, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of interesting, and that like I don't know, it's just like that's kind of like imprinted in my head for that
Yeah.
generation and me and stuff, So there's
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I
For
just
me
didn't
it's
see
like
I didn't see Lily Rose Depp as an interesting casting choice.
no.
And I didn't see the type of dude that was married to her, the freaking
He
Jonathan
was
Archer.
you know what? I don't think any of them were casted well. I think that's what the main problem is. He was okay, but the guy who was like the husband of the blonde one,
Yeah,
I don't remember what his name was or anything. He fucking sucked. I hated every single fucking scene that guy was in, and I don't remember his name or anything, but he was terrible. He was
right.
terrible. The obviously Willem Dafoe is awesome. He's awesome in everything he's in.
But see,
The
really, you know what? Here's the thing. I disagree with you on that one. I actually did not like William Dafoe in this one. I thought
okay,
he was too
I
much
understand.
William Dafoe.
Yeah, okay. I was just about to say you probably didn't like him because he was just playing Willem Dafoe, but with
Right.
like fancy clothes. But if you enjoy Willem Dafoe as a personality, he was a highlight of the movie for that reason alone. It's
Right.
like some actors just basically just act as themselves and that's fine. Like
Right. I mean,
everything
yeah,
that they're in.
he's become
Yeah.
he's become the
Yeah.
another Bill Murray in a way where Bill
Yeah.
Murray is just Bill
Yeah.
Murray. And
Yeah, that's true.
which is interesting because in Lost in Translation, he's Bill Murray, but it's his best performance of all time. Like
Yeah.
it's like he takes all his kind of comedic power and puts it into a
Hmm.
very emotional, very real performance where you're like, oh,
Yeah.
freaking Oscar worthy. Um, but yeah, I mean, I liked Orlok. I thought he was pretty good. You know what? The movie felt like very small. It felt like there was no distance. There was no depth to
Yeah.
it. It felt
Yeah.
like just almost like a play on television.
Well, I think I think that was somewhat on purpose because it was supposed to be, I'm assuming here, a claustrophobic film. Like it was
Right.
supposed to feel like you were being squeezed. And that's something that I actually didn't like about the entire movie. There was so much tension that was never released. And then we get to the fucking end, and there I am just like, what?
Oh, that's
At,
it?
you know, because if you've seen the 1970, the Werner Herzog
Right. I've
version,
never
okay,
ever
or
seen
if,
that one.
yeah, if you've seen the silent film, okay, so um there's a little bit more of like a, I can never pronounce this word right.
Denouement. Yeah.
Denouement. I know how to spell it, but I'm not going to spell it.
Right. That's what happens when you're
Anyway, that
autodidact.
word, okay? Yeah. So, but yeah, we didn't get anything. We didn't get
Right.
anything. And there
Yeah.
was so much buildup and so much buildup, and it's like you could take like half the movie could be cut completely out, and it wouldn't have fucking mattered.
Right. Basically, the
So,
movie cucks you in the same way that the vampire cucks everybody.
yeah,
And it's just like
there
that.
you go.
And
I think why people really liked it though is because, to give Eggers credit, we haven't seen a movie like that in a very, very long time.
that's
So I
true.
will give credit where it's true, where it's due. We haven't seen a movie like that in a long time. And I am a fan of his. I really liked, I haven't seen the Valkyrie one, the
Oh,
Norse
the
one.
the vampire one. I'm not the vampire, the Viking one, the Northman.
Yeah. Northman, that's what it's called. Yeah. I haven't seen that one. I really liked, and I think we disagree on this too. I really liked The Lighthouse,
I love
but
The
I think we
Lighthouse.
both agree.
No, that's The Lighthouse is my favorite movie of his.
Oh, is there? I'm thinking of somebody else now.
Yeah,
Somebody,
no,
somebody I
Lighthouse is
speak
my
to on
favorite movie.
Substack. I was disagreeing with them about Lighthouse. My favorite of his is The Witch,
I
which
like
is
The
why
Witch
I did
also.
have, yeah, I had a lot of, I had very high hopes for this one because of how much I like The Witch. But I don't know. I think The Witch was just, better.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel like The Witch worked because Eggers is The Witch and The Lighthouse work because they're very small, kind of set piece kind of movies. In this, in this, not
they
a
didn't feel as claustrophobic as
right.
Nosferatu.
They're exactly Nosferatu.
Nosferatu.
Well, the
I don't know how to
vampire
say the fucking
Dracula
word.
story,
Yeah.
like you're like, there's supposed to be a ship, and he's supposed to go to London, and and then it's just like it just felt really small. It's like
Yeah.
one character takes a freaking horse and gets there like in 3 days, and then he's got to. It makes no sense
Yeah.
logistically why he
Yeah.
would go from Eastern Europe to Northern Germany by boat. That's really weird when you think about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, it makes sense to go from Eastern Europe to England by boat, but
Yet
not
somehow the way that the characters move around the map in the 90s version,
right.
somehow that made more fucking sense. I don't know. I can't explain
It
it.
did. It did. It made a lot more sense. It felt bigger, and the London
Yeah.
scenes with all the people just felt much bigger, more
Hmm.
grandiose, and more. Oh, vampires coming to the big city.
Yeah. I
Um.
didn't really care much for the plague stuff in this one. I
Yeah, the
thought it
rats
was
and
just kind
stuff.
of like, if you were to take just that and expand it into its own film, this horrible rat plague, get rid
Yeah.
of all the other shit, that would be cool.
Right. It's like she brings the rat plague. It felt
Yeah.
really like, wouldn't it be cool if we had rats? The only thing is
Yeah.
that like it's almost too on the nose in a way because you're
Hmm.
like, oh, it's a plague of disease. Foreigners bring disease, and then it's like, well, you're being
Hmm.
on the nose here, and it's just like Eggers. Okay, Eggers is a good filmmaker. He's just not a great one. He hasn't really had a great movie with Lighthouse. It's good, it's not great, and he's very much in the same way. I feel about him in the same way I feel about Michael Nolan, right? They're great
Hmm.
directors. They make very competent, very well acted movies that kind of lack some kind of spirit to me. That's why
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm actually not a fan of Nolan
I'm not a
because
fan of
like
him at
I
all.
feel
Yeah.
like his movies lack soul. They're just kind of cold.
They're technical
I've
Apple
never,
commercials. They're cold Apple
yeah.
commercials. And in some of his movies it works. Like in my favorite one of his movies is the World War II one, Dunkirk, and
Yeah,
it
Dunkirk was
works
actually
because
yeah,
it
that one
plays
was
with the
good.
time and the pilots and this like precision timing type thing.
Mhm.
but ultimately, like, there's a missing soul to him. It's why I prefer Tim Burton Batmans to
Yeah.
his Batmans, because those
Yeah.
Batmans are stupid in a way. They're silly, but man,
Yeah, they don't take themselves too seriously.
you watch Michelle Pfeiffer and like Danny DeVito, man, they steal that movie. You know, it's
Yeah,
just such a great. They're so
absolutely.
great and they're fun to watch. Well,
Hmm.
even the Heath Ledger Joker, it's like it's kind of a downer. It's kind of dark, and it's just like
Hmm.
it's just weird. You know, and people
Hmm.
always fucking come at me for that. I just and then the best, my biggest like dislike of Nolan, yeah, I think it is really illustrated in Inception. I mean, this guy, it's a movie about bouncing to
I fucking
dream.
hated Inception. I'm
It's an
sorry.
idiotic
I know
movie
that.
because he has no imagination. His version, like, that's how you film dreams. Nobody has dreams like that, dude. Like,
No.
dude, come on. Like, you must be a really dull motherfucker to like, oh, I had a dream about
Scene.
skiing. Like none of his.
Yeah.
That's not how dreams are. Dreams are weird and crazy and like,
Yeah.
like David Lynch movies, man. That's a dream right there or a nightmare. But he takes such an autistic, like no inner monologue approach to like dreams,
Hmm.
where you're like, why you've made a movie about hopping through dreams completely dull like a Gap store, dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's
I don't know.
enough about Nolan, right?
Yeah.
Do you know? We'll bring it back
Yeah.
to literature. Do you know?
Yeah.
Beetlejuice. Did you know that it was written by? It wasn't a Tim Burton movie, right? It was written by an author, a horror author. Did you know that?
No, actually, I did not.
Okay, I'll tell you right now, and I'll tell for readers too. So the the screenplay Beetlejuice was written by Michael McDowell. He was a horror author in the 80s, and
Oh,
yeah, he wrote that. And one of his biggest books is called The Elementals, right? He
that's the one I was gonna say. Yeah, I read that a couple of years ago.
right, the one with the
Yeah.
sand and he's a
Yeah.
southern author, writes about the South and
Hmm.
stuff. He I believe he passed away from AIDS. He was a homosexual guy. Um, and in that book, when I was reading it, I was reading it and just and there's a character who's like a young kid, and I'm like, this is fucking Lydia, right? From Beetlejuice. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
Lydia, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
that,
a good point, actually, thinking about it.
yeah, and then I looked it up, and I was like, oh shit, he wrote Beetlejuice for Tim Burton, and that character Lydia is straight up from the Elementals. I mean, changed a
Yeah.
bit, different
That's a
name
good
and
point,
stuff, right?
actually.
But yeah, she's
Yeah.
the character from the Elementals, and he wrote a bunch of really good like horror novels, but the best ones he did, he wrote this series of like 6 books, very short, but like they're all connected. They're just in one large book in parts, right? Called Blackwater,
Hmm.
and it's called the Blackwater Saga, and it's this southern like almost like it's like the southern ghost horror family drama, like generational drama.
Hmm.
And one of the care about this family called the Blackwater. It that takes place in the
Yeah.
Blackwater, the town of Blackwater, like Tennessee or Mississippi or something, or Alabama, right? Called
Hmm.
it takes place in the small town of Perdido, Alabama, right? And it's about this family through like 3 or so generations, and the key like pivoting figure is this woman that they kind of one of the son finds after the town floods, right? Well, it turns out that
Hmm.
she's a sea monster, right? She's like a sea monster of some sort, right?
Yeah.
Like a river monster, not a sea monster, right? And basically, the whole story, there's ghosts. It's a really freaking fantastic like novel,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, I've
it's
had that one on my TBR for a long time.
I read it like
Yeah.
back to back to back to back. Like I sat down and I read
Hmm.
that in like 2, 3 days because I love this so much. It's not for everybody because it's a very character driven. It's almost like a like freaking like a TV show, like a long TV show where you
Yeah.
got multiple characters like Dallas, But yeah, but he wrote these books and he wrote I think he wrote parts of Nightmare Before Christmas also, and a lot of the Tim Burton early stuff. So he's the creator of
Hmm.
Lydia. Anyways, about books, right? What you're here to talk about is you released a new novel like
Just
yesterday.
yesterday. Yeah, there's
Right.
another one. It's my third published book, fourth if you count my Substack serial. But yeah,
Okay.
it just came out yesterday.
All right. The Ghost of,
Hmm.
I'm going to pronounce it wrong. How do you pronounce it?
Well, seeing as I made the word up, you can pronounce it however you feel like, but The Ghosts of Tyros Cole is the title.
All right. You're dipping into kind of Sword and Planet in this one, right? Tell us
Yeah,
about it. Tell
it's
us
a
about it
little
real
bit.
fast. What's it about?
Okay, so um it's inspired by a lot of the same sort of things that you could say inspired Star Wars. So like French sci-fi comics from the 70s and like Edgar Rice Burroughs, like, Barsoom stuff and all that stuff. So it's got a lot of similar influences, but it goes in a very different direction. And there is romance. It is a kissing book. Okay.
Oh, a
Uh
kissing book.
yes, but it's not like a capital R romance. Like it's not structured like a romance novel. And I say this because one of my beta readers is very, very into the romance genre. And
Okay.
she was not keen on the romance stuff because it didn't play out like a standard romance novel should. So I just give that caveat that like yes, it's a kissing book, there is romance, but it's not like a romance novel, especially for, you know, the male listeners who might not want a romance novel. But that said, most of my readers so far have been dudes, and the feedback has been way different. So just throw that out there. But yeah, it's about a planet that was discovered, forgotten about, and the people who were left on this planet ended up evolving along with the strange nature of this world. So one of the components of this planet is like a strange mineral that only appears on this planet called tierosite. And there's very strange properties to it. So it glows. Um, and once you've lived on the planet long enough, and especially the people who have acclimatized to this world, you could hear it. It makes a sound. So the novel is kind of like figuring out what this stuff is, why it makes this noise. Um, and there's also these like giant monoliths that are made out of the stuff. And they also like they're singing stones basically. Like if the wind blows through them, you can hear them. Um,
Okay.
so why do the rocks sing? That sort of stuff. There's the central like villain character. His kind of like mission is to figure out the power of the stones, why they do what they do, and all that stuff. So there's a lot of like environmental stuff
Like a like
in it.
very like Fern Gully-ish illusions,
Mm,
but not really. I didn't get that
no,
from that,
okay.
but
So I'm not going to say entirely no, but it's kind of like it's not obvious.
right.
You can read the book in two different ways. From the feedback that I've gotten from people, you can read it as purely a space romance action fun romp,
Hmm.
or you can read it as a kind of like mystery, and then by the time you get to the end, you realize, well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it has like an environmentalist thread through the book. So it's been really interesting getting the feedback from readers to see who reads it one way and who reads it another way.
Right. That's
That's
actually
been really
that's
fascinating.
fascinating. So, uh, because you're on today's episode,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do a review of it. I'm going to withhold my opinions until I do a formal review because I think
Okay.
it's
So how
important. It's in
did you
poor
read it?
taste for me to, but
I see.
I will do a spoiler alert. I'm enjoyed it very much.
How far are you through it?
I'm almost done, not
Okay.
100%. And I really enjoyed it, and I've liked everything I've read from you. I really liked Palace, and I mean, Palace had a romance, and I
Yeah.
people didn't mention anything about that. And I thought Palace was really romance heavy. I think all novels should. It's really interesting. Like when people go,
Mhm.
"Oh God, there's romance in it."
Yeah.
Uh,
What is this for girls?
was
Did a woman write this? Yeah.
well, as far back as almost every novel, every like action fantasy, novel I can think of has romance in it. Like
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys know, but humans they fuck.
Yeah,
You
it's
know what I
almost
mean?
like the whole reason for our existence is reproduction.
That's where
So
babies
like,
come from, right?
yeah.
So, I don't know about you, but when I was in my 20s, which is like the age of most protagonists, and I was single, romance was a big, important aspect of my nightly goings out. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
that's kind of what we did. Matter of fact, a lot of plots that we could say would be part of my auto fiction would consist around attempted moves towards
Hmm.
romance and its failures or whatever, and the disasters that come along with it. So I never understand why people don't well, like, oh, I don't want romance. Like, what would you want to read a technical
Yeah.
manual? I mean, what are
Yeah,
we
exactly.
what are we
Yeah.
doing? A
Yeah.
historical troop battalion,
Yeah.
strategic formation manual. Um, well, this is your second science fiction. Well, science fiction novel. You're not a
Yeah.
very hard sci-fi writer. You're a
No, okay. That's another caveat too, is that the this is not hard sci-fi in this one. I did a lot more, I went a lot harder with Palace.
right,
This one is far more like so when you watch heavy metal, like
right. That
um
that's
it's
exactly
not,
what I was thinking about.
yeah.
Actually, that's the vibes I got. So you
Mhm.
succeeded very well because I did get the heavy metal parts where she's riding that crazy bird thing. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
Or the that whole French
The
thing,
oh my
right?
gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of the one. It's uh the
The
one
girl.
where he's on trial.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the freaking name of it now, and that's like my favorite movie.
It's
I'm having a brain fart.
it's
Anyway,
been a while,
that
but yeah,
one,
no, that's the kind of vibe.
that
You're
sort
right.
of thing.
It
Yeah.
is has a very French fantasy vibe, which I
Hmm.
like. You also have a lot of. I don't think you're going to ever escape this because I think you programmed yourself to write in this kind of mode, which is very Vance like kind of writing, which is I think why a lot of like real old school fantasy sci-fi people like your writing a lot because you do have a very Vance kind of vibe to it.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like you're just knocking him out. You're just you like this is the second. Well, this is the third book since I've known you, right?
Okay, so these three, so technically four if you include my Substack serial, they were all written almost like manically back to back to back.
Right.
So this one here is my last pre-Substack novel. So since I started Substack, and that was in 2023, oh my gosh, we're coming up to 2 years in April. Holy shit. Anyway, so since then, I've been kind of focusing on like more short stories, getting these published, working on like maybe my poetry or whatever.
Right.
So now that this one is out of my system, I'm actually having a bit of an existential crisis. Like, oh
Yep.
no, what do I do now? I have to write another book now. So, yeah. So I put out Palace in 2023, and then Kenny Thornwick in 2024, and then this one in 2025. We'll have to see. I'm going to be as surprised as you guys are to see what I might produce for next year or the year after.
Well, let me see. You did
It's gonna be
you did
brand
kind of
new.
like Star Trek slash OG Star Trek slash kind of Twilight Zone with Palace. Um,
Hmm.
that's like where I would place it. And then you did kind of Sword and Planet, Dune-ish
Hmm.
slash kind of like full heavy metal with this one. I think you should do a cyberpunk novel next.
Should I? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
We
see.
do a cyberpunk novel,
Yep.
or something along those lines. Or maybe you should go full blown romance. And I'm talking about romance.
Like romance,
Romantasy.
romance,
No, romantasy. We go
not
into
romantasy.
romantasy. That's where we need to
Or
go.
I should go to
Yeah,
romantasy.
you
Yeah, well,
should
I
go
mean,
to
that's where all the
romantasy.
big bucks are, right?
Make that money,
Yeah.
sell out. All right.
Yep. Yep.
800 pages of fairy pornography or whatever
Yeah,
people
really
read.
humongous. Okay, I don't know if my kids are listening, so I can't make that joke, but yeah, you know.
My wife reads some of this stuff,
Yeah.
but she
Okay, so I
she doesn't like the full blown stuff. She likes the softcore
yeah.
romantasy. You know what I mean?
Well, what's really funny is that like I come from the era of finding your stepmom's old bodice rippers on her night table and being bored and reading them way too
Right.
young. I think that's a freaking what do they call that? Canon event in a lot of young millennial girls' lives, right? So she was reading like Joanna Lindsay, and then I got a little bit older and I discovered Rosemary Rogers and um, Patricia Hagen. I think that's her name. Anyway, and those books, okay, I don't talk about a lot, but if you've ever read a Bodice Ripper, they've definitely as far as like structure goes,
Right.
have influenced me a lot. Because they are full of adventure. Like, holy shit. The amount of okay, so let's say there's a Rosemary Rogers book, and I don't remember the name of it, but basically the pirate steals this bitch and then he rapes her for fucking 500 pages or whatever. It's a bodice ripper, okay? Uh
Is it have
but
like a
there's
Fabio on
a
the cover, like a Fabio cover
oh
book?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And then but there's a lot of really really fun action in it. And actually, one of the best depictions of the American Civil War that I have ever read in a book is Patricia Hagen's Love and War.
Hmm.
It so the main character in that book is your standard like foot stomping, you know, petulant, I don't want to wear no dress, annoying.
1990s heroin kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, 70s, yeah.
70s, that era. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, she wants to be a doctor, but also she wants to go to the ball and put on pretty dresses and whatever. So, but then the war breaks out, and then she's kidnapped and raped in a cave like 1,000 times. And then she breaks out from that. She gets rescued by the hero who is a humongous asshole. Uh she runs away from him, and then she finds herself having to use the doctor skills that she wasn't supposed to learn because that's not very ladylike, and she's apparently really really good. And the depiction of this part where she's helping the doctor like amputate limbs, it is seriously one of the grossest things I remember ever reading at the time. And like
Dude.
this is a romance novel, so she's it depicts the war. There's a fucking exploding dog. Like apparently, I don't remember which side did it. They like put like a hand bomb or something on a dog and told the dog to run across and fucking explodes.
Shit.
Wild shit. Like these books have some wild, wild stuff in it. Um the
Question
yeah.
real quick. The the main character, the shadow daddy of that book,
Yeah.
is he a northerner or a southerner?
Okay. So I believe I actually
Because that's key.
I believe that he actually changes sides a bunch. Like he's
Mm,
known as kind of like a
he's like a bandit.
flip-floppy kind of rake kind of guy.
Okay.
Fuck, now I'm gonna have to
Who
look it up.
rapes her? Northerners or southerners? I mean, this is
Oh,
in.
they all do. Oh, she gets it from everybody.
Okay, she's like
Don't read a bodice ripper if you require trigger
she's on the
warnings.
Mason Dixie line basically. She's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, fuck. Okay. Well, okay. So that's speaking of trigger warnings too, like the current era of romance readers is a totally different beast than the romance readers from back in the day. Like they're completely different.
Right.
So I think we were talking the other day on Substack about this. Like there's romantasy readers, and then there's romance readers, and then there's old school romance readers.
Right.
And like romance is huge. And
Right.
there's
I mean,
not always a whole lot of overlap. There's a lot of people who only read the older romance novels. There's people who only read contemporary modern meet cute romances. There's some people who only read like, I don't know, hockey romance or whatever. And then there's the girls who they've come of age in the romantasy boom. They've probably never read an actual romance novel. They only read romantasy. They've only
right.
ever read romantasy.
Right. It's
Yeah, it's
interesting
wild.
because I did one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and we've kind of organically rolled into it, is publishing industry stuff. And
Hmm.
I actually find the romantasy kind of explosion very interesting, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm probably gonna have my wife join us one of these days to talk about, because she's much more of a reader in that genre than I am.
Hmm.
I've, over the last like 2, 3 years, I've become not much into fantasy,
Hmm.
and I've kind of moved away from it. I used to read a lot more for a while, and I just the grim dark era kind of bored me after a
Yeah.
while. I'm like, oh my gosh, another grim dark thing,
Yeah, I can only read a description of someone blowing their nose on the ground or into their hand like so many times before it
Right.
gets really gross. Yeah.
I was never a big fan of Game of Thrones at all. I read all of them. I read the whole thing, everything that's out. And by like the last one, I was like, oh, I'm bored. There were certain characters I liked. I tried I read every single Wheel of Time novel up until the 10th one, I believe.
I haven't read a single one.
Yeah,
One,
and
I have a friend who's really, really into Wheel of Time. He keeps trying to get me to read them. I'm like, nope,
no,
too
it's
many.
just, yeah.
I've had kids. You know what? Once you have kids, like I basically have stopped reading huge
Yeah,
series
ain't
after having
nobody
kids.
got
I just don't
time
have
for
the
that
fucking
shit.
time.
No,
Yeah,
it's too much of a time commitment, and I'm just
yeah.
like, I am much more my reading. What I enjoy out of reading, I enjoy style and
Hmm.
character, and unfortunately, a lot of fantasy is much more about plot than style and character, and it
Hmm.
doesn't do much for me. It's like cool. The worst novel of all time is The Name of the Wind, and
Yeah,
I
we've talked about this one a few times. I think
I wish
we just can't help ourselves.
I wish the pox on the person that convinced me to read that novel. And it was in my like, oh, I'm gonna read everything. I'm not gonna DNF anything kind of era.
Hmm.
And I read through the whole thing, and I want to like, oh my God, I'm so mad about it like a decade later. And I never understood how people could enjoy that, because that is a novel where there's no style, there's no character, and nothing happens. It's
Hmm.
like you made whatever. I don't even want to go into. I hate it so much.
Yep.
But fantasy
Well,
wise, you know who I like. I don't know. Have you ever read any of Robin Hobb's stuff?
I actually haven't. I
I
have not.
really
No.
enjoy Robin Hobb stuff, and her main one is the Assassin's Apprentice novels,
Hmm.
and but she has like a side kind of series of four called the Live Ship Traders, and that's
Hmm.
probably my favorite fantasy, like I guess quadrology, because there's four of
Yeah.
them. Out of all of them, and or maybe three, I don't remember, but I really love those, and that almost has a weird romantasy vibe to it. Like it's like tough girl goes on a ship, gets kidnapped by pirate rapist kind of dude,
Hmm.
and it's really good. And ships talk, and they're like basically like Dungeons and Dragons, like living artifacts. The ships are.
Yeah.
Uh, it's like a cool like reveal, like what they are and that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed
Hmm.
it. I mean, I love Vance's fantasy. I love
Yeah.
the Green Pearl, Lioness, Mauda.
I think it's really too bad that he only ever really did one like Lioness trilogy is his only real fantasy, like capital
Right,
F fantasy. Like a lot of his other stuff is like more like sci fantasy, right?
right. Like
It still has that like science fiction element to it.
the whole like there's like some high tech stuff and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, like Dying Earth is so far advanced in the future that it feels like fantasy, but it's not.
Right,
So Lioness is his only real like big.
trad
capital
fantasy.
F fantasy. Yeah. So it's kind of too bad that that's his only one, but I can kind of understand why.
Well,
I think by the time he wrote Lioness, he was already going blind. Um,
okay.
so his writing career kind of like slowed down at that point. But it would have been really cool to see
Well,
what else he might have done.
I just find, I just find it like fascinating
Mhm.
that there is this huge subculture of women that are reading Dungeons and Dragons shit, basically. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
Um, and like my wife does, she like reads all those little book talk things and all
Mhm.
that stuff. But it's not just her. She has a bunch of friends that also are sharing these books. And
Yeah.
I was at a
It's big.
I was at a work
Yeah.
dinner. We had a going away party for a coworker, and she's one of these people that's into this stuff. And my wife's like, "Oh, hey,"
Hmm.
they started talking, and out of nowhere, another coworker's girlfriend that I've never met before, nobody's ever met before. He just brought her for the first time. She's
Hmm.
like she's like this like super cute dentist lady, like woman, right?
Yep.
In her mid 20s, late 20s maybe. And she walks up, and then when they're talking about these books, she goes, "Oh, check this out!" And she shows off her like tattoo, which is some like random romanticy shit that like all of them knew what it was, And I was like,
Nice.
"What in the fucking geekery is this?" Like, here I am, I'm a writer, god damn it, and I don't know anything that they're talking about. I'm like,
It's
it's a different world,
it's a different world, yeah.
right?
Um, and so on the one hand, as far as the younger readers go, you say it's kind of like the YA boom, right?
Right.
Everybody's shitting on YA because they're contrarian and it's too fucking popular and they have a problem with that. But a lot of these people, there's gonna be two different types of people that come out of this popularity. They're either going to continue to read exclusively in that genre for like the rest of their lives,
Right.
or there's going to be people that are like, wow, this reading thing is really cool, and they're going to want to explore. uh Maybe they were poisoned by reading by having assigned some shitty book in high school or something,
No, I agree. I
but
agree.
they're gonna realize that reading is fun.
Right.
And
It's like the Harry Potter thing, or
yeah.
Stephen King. The
Oh
Stephen
my
King
God, I thought
horror
my
thing.
mic just unplugged. Fuck. Okay, we're good.
You're good. I
Sorry.
can hear you fine. I mean,
Okay.
look, the 80s was a horror boom, and
Yeah.
everybody was reading Stephen King and
Hmm.
all those novels, that whole era, right? The
Yeah.
Stand and that kind of stuff. And there was people that just read Stephen King, and
Yeah.
people probably said the same thing, like, "Oh, this is crap. This is just trash. Only morons read this stuff."
Hmm.
And then I guarantee you, most people stopped reading after that kind of fad, or they lost the taste for it or whatever.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of people moved on to different stuff, moved out, branched outside of horror, branched outside of like science fiction, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then you had, uh, the nearest thing to romantasy that I think I read really would be the Anne Rice vampire stuff. All right, that's probably the
Yeah, that
raunchy.
totally
That was the
yeah. Yeah, that would totally qualify, I
that
think.
was my generation. More, well, maybe I'm a little bit young for that, but it was like the generation Gen X kind of
Yeah.
romantasy smut kind of stuff. Because I remember
Hmm.
reading The Witching Hour when I was like in middle school or high school, early high school. I was like, oh, this is
Hmm.
raunchy shit. They're
Yeah.
banging a corpse over here and stuff, and there's necrophilia and weird, like, ghost
Yeah.
rape and stuff. And it's just, um, and you had that era, and then you had the Harry Potter kind of YA explosion. And people said, "Oh,
Yeah.
people aren't going to read after Harry Potter." Well, the Harry Potter people moved on to romantasy basically, because that's my wife's generation. They and
Yeah.
I'm going to guess you. How old are you? 25, 30,
Yeah.
30. Okay, you're
37.
you're
37.
exactly the
Yeah.
same age as my wife, right?
Yeah.
And so you are the Harry Potter generation basically. I'm a little bit
I
I'm older.
am technically in years. I've actually never read a single Harry Potter book.
Me either. I've seen all the movies now.
Yeah. I haven't even watched a movie. Like I've just totally disconnected myself completely.
They're actually really good. I don't care what anybody
That's what, you know
says.
what? You know what? That's cool.
Yeah,
I'm still not
I
watching it
actually
though.
really enjoy them.
Yeah.
I watched them all like the last 2 years, because I was way too fucking cool to get into Harry Potter when
Yeah.
it came out. I was like, oh, there's
I'm the whole like academic kind of setting just like isn't for me. I very rarely there's only been a couple books that I've read that's based in a school setting
right.
that I haven't wanted to throw out the window. I
That's
don't
how I
know what
feel
it
too,
is.
though. I
Yeah.
feel the same way too. You know, I don't like academic stuff, but I do like the Harry Potter movies, and I do like
Hmm.
The Secret History by what's her name?
Donna Tartt.
By Donna Tartt. Yeah, I love that
Yeah.
book. It's a great book.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't read that one. Yeah, I'm just thinking. I think the last time I enjoyed like wizard schoolish kind of thing. I'm trying to remember. Was it I'm trying to remember because I read these books when I was like 11. It was either Wizard of Earthsea or Dragon Riders of Pern. Did they both have that sort of? Or am I just thinking Wizard of
I
Earthsea?
think you're thinking,
I need to revisit Wizard of
yeah,
Earthsea for sure.
I think it is Wizard of Ursula. I haven't read that. That's
Yeah.
Ursula Le Guin,
Yeah.
Le Gay. I can't
Le
pronounce
Guin,
her
yeah,
name. Le
whatever
Guin.
whatever her name is. Who cares?
I read that a long time ago. I don't remember much from it. Um,
Yeah, that's my problem too. I read it so long ago that I like don't remember much. I remember more of Dragon Riders of Pern than I do
right.
of Wizard of Earthsea. So I think
That's
there
the
was something about
Australian
Dragon
one.
Riders. Anne McCaffrey.
Okay, I'm okay. Okay, yeah, yeah. That
Yeah.
I never read that one, but you know
I
what's
loved Anne McCaffrey. When I was like between the ages of like 11 to like 14, I read a ton of Anne McCaffrey and like Mercedes Lackey and all them.
all those
Yeah.
books. Yeah,
Those were like the YA fantasies of our generation other than Harry Potter. So they were like they weren't I would say Harry Potter's more middle grade actually.
right. Well, Harry
Yeah.
Potter grows with you. So the
Yeah.
complexities. That's one thing that she did really well is that the plots and the themes
Yeah.
scaled up with the generation,
Yeah,
because
for sure.
you start off reading the first Harry Potter and or the first movie, and it's age appropriate. And it stays age appropriate for the characters in the movie, or the ages
Hmm.
of the characters in the book. And by the last three or so, it gets fucking dark. It gets
Yeah.
dark, and it's like, oh, you're dealing with some
Hmm.
crazy themes here.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that worked really well, and it made it such a phenomenon. And she kind of tapped into this mm, zeitgeist
Yeah. Well,
of concepts and stuff. You know,
yeah, she clearly did something right. I mean, she is like a bajillionaire now. So
right?
she's clearly done something right. It's just I don't know. I think I was
Too cool.
yeah, I've always been a contrarian. I don't know what else to say.
No, no, me too.
I
Me
saw that
too.
Harry Potter is popular and I'm like, I'm never gonna read
That's
it.
exactly how I was. I'm like, "So I'm going to read
Yeah.
Dostoevsky instead. You know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like that guy, and then I was like, and then it wasn't until my daughter got into it because she was watching like the first movie at like
Yeah.
my brother's house or something, and I was like, huh, this is actually pretty fun. This is actually
Yeah.
pretty good.
Well,
It's good.
your daughter is definitely the target audience
Right, and she's
for that sort of thing. Yeah.
she's 6, and
Yeah.
we watch them now on Christmas. We watched all the movies this Christmas, and I really enjoyed it. And we went to the
Hmm.
Universal Studios thing and did it. The whole they're fun, and there's
Hmm.
video games to play, and it's kind of like it's like a Star Wars thing, but not Star Wars because you know tired of Star Wars and whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that people reading books is a good thing, period.
Yeah.
Whatever they're reading, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It,
And like you can make the same argument too about like guys who only read like military sci-fi.
right,
You know what I mean? It's
right,
the same sort of thing where like some people just get really really into one very niche genre and
and
they
stick
either
to it.
branch out or they don't. Like,
Like
yeah.
westerns or something like that.
Yeah, like westerns or whatever.
I tend to be kind of a branch out kind of reader. I
Well,
like
yeah,
everything,
I read everything, yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
I do tend to. It's all on moods. It's like I
Yeah.
read a lot of. I'm like well read in most genres, basically. I've read a little bit of like
Hmm.
I've read some of the big stuff in almost everything. Like there's very few
I don't
things.
I think of genres that I have not read. I don't think I don't think I've read anything that you could actually call like a thriller. I don't think I've read horror and I've read contemporary, but like a lot of these like uh, especially the thrillers that you find at like the checkout at the grocery store. I
I've
don't
read
think
Gone
you've
Girl.
like that genre. Yeah, like that genre. I don't think I've read anything from that.
Yeah,
I'm
I've read.
really not big on contemporary fiction unless it's contemporary in air quotes to a previous decade, but I don't like reading about things that could be happening like right now.
Okay, that
I don't
makes
know.
sense.
It's like I'm weird like that. I don't know.
You don't like.
As soon as I see somebody or I see the words like, and he opened his bottle of Coke, and it just takes me right out because I'm like now I'm picturing a Coke bottle, and I don't know. I'd rather picture something fun. I don't know. I guess I
So
don't know.
you're not reading any of that dime square auto fiction about the internet.
No,
Okay, okay.
I haven't picked up any of those. I there are a couple actually. Now that I've said that, I have tried to correct my contrarian ways. And I always say, like, give a genre at least one college try, right? Even
Okay.
if I think that something's really stupid. Like in December, I did read a very popular, it was called Quicksilver. It's a really, really popular romantasy right now. I think it got optioned even. Anyway, so I read that one because I'm like, I can't hate on romantasy if I've never read a romantasy. So, and to be honest, I don't hate on romantasy because I read both romance and fantasy. So obviously there's a reason people like this. So anyway,
So
um,
24-year-old Sarah's Faye
yeah,
is good at keeping
yeah,
secrets. No one knows about the strange
yeah.
powers she possesses or the fact that she's been picking pockets and
It's so
stealing from the
stupid. Oh my
undying
God.
queen's reservoirs for as long as she can
Yeah.
remember. In the land of the unforgiving desert, there isn't much a girl would do for a glass of water. Ooh. But a secret is like a knot.
Ooh. Yeah.
Sooner or later, it is bound to come undone. Now I get some S&M kind of stuff.
Well, here's the funny thing about that is that it's definitely written for people who have actually never read a dark fantasy before.
Okay.
So I thought those parts were actually kind of cute. Like, aw, good try, It was all right.
Um,
There was a couple parts that made me want to just gouge my eyeballs out. Like, there was a scene where she's having a they're forcing her
real
to
fast. I just got to tell you that
yeah.
I opened Amazon and it says I own this book, so my wife must have read it.
She probably has. So she might
Because
chuck if she's gonna listen to this, she might
I have a
chuckle.
read now. I have a read now button on it.
Yeah.
So
So okay. So there's a scene where she's being forced to have a bath because she's like this poor, disgusting woman.
she's a
So
little
these elves are
wretch,
forcing her to have a bath, and
filthy wretch.
the author actually uses the word shampoo, and I'm like, okay, this is supposed to be some magical fucking fairyland. What is she using? Fucking elf Pantene? Like it takes me right out. Don't use words like shampoo if it's supposed to be a freaking magical fairyland. I don't know.
Shampoo
It just bothers me so
like a
much.
French word, like it has meanings
I
to
don't
it.
know. It's like the Tiffany problem. Have you heard of the Tiffany problem?
No, what's the Tiffany problem?
Okay, so the Tiffany problem is even though the name Tiffany is a medieval name, because it got so popular, like everybody who was born in and around the 80s knows a Tiffany. It
Right,
got so popular that now if you were to write a medieval story with a character named Tiffany, people would be like, what the fuck is like, what is this? Are you joking? So that's the Tiffany problem. Even though it's historically accurate, it sounds stupid
right.
in
You
modern
should
to
write
modern readers.
you should write a
Yeah.
fantasy novel with the word named Tiffany, just to
Actually, yeah.
like
Yeah. And
Tiffany.
there's also a lot of modern girls names that used to be male. Like I want to say or how's this one? Okay. Um as someone of Eastern European descent, don't you find it interesting that there's a lot of female Sashas over here?
Right, which
Isn't that weird?
is
Yeah. It's a
basically
male's name.
it's a male's name. It's short for
Yeah.
like basically I think yeah. What's it short for?
Or
What Misha is short
shit.
for Alex. So what's
Vanya is short for Ivan. Shit, what is it
it's
short
for
for? I don't
Alex.
remember.
It's my freaking
Alex, yeah.
name. I'm
Yeah.
done. Right.
I
It's
don't know, I'm not Russian.
Sasha is the Eastern European, well, the
Russian
Slavic.
diminutives are actually really neat, yeah.
Yeah, like Misha, right? Misha is
Mm-hmm.
short for Michael or Mikhail.
Mm-hmm.
I know because that's my brother's name, and my
Mm-hmm.
Russian grandma used to call him Misha all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's short for Sasha is short for Alex. It's basically Alex, which is weird.
Yeah.
Russian names are hard, and they throw in those weird middle names where it's like
Yeah.
Fodoyovna and shit like that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I find it, like I said, I find it interesting. You know, reading these novels and kind of not because I'm not reading them, but reading about them. And my wife always reads
Mm-hmm.
me chapters and stuff, and she's always reading, telling me all about them. Um, first of all, they're interesting to look into from a female psychology kind of aspect,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
man, there are some grotesque, gruesome shit in some of these novels,
Yeah.
and you're like, well,
Yeah.
what do you think? If a dude put some of this stuff in his novels, he would be like, "Oh my God, a sexist pervert,"
Well, that's
Like,
why every book should have a list of trigger warnings at the front so that nobody accidentally comes across blah 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 blah.
well,
I'm not a fan of trigger warnings myself, but in the romantasy scene, a lot of readers, and like this may or may not include your wife, I don't know, but a lot of readers who gravitate towards things like YA and romantasy and stuff are
right.
big fans of trigger warnings. So if anybody's listening to this and you plan on being a romance writer, you're gonna have to start liking trigger warnings because
They just exist
you
in
need
that
you
world,
you
right?
need them. Yeah, you need them in that world. But
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
I
it's
don't take it.
interesting because like some of the stuff, and she reads me some of this stuff, and I'm like,
Hmm.
holy crap, that's just dark,
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's an obsession with like being prisoners, being raped, being overpowered, um, a lot
Yeah.
of that kind of stuff. And you know, honestly, like if a male author would write this stuff, he'd have the woke brigade coming after him, and it's fascinating.
So
You know what I
so
mean? It's
speaking yeah.
fascinating.
So speaking of the bodice ripper era, like the 70s era, have you ever read the Flashman books?
No, but I'm familiar with them. Yeah.
Fuck, you should. They're so good. But if you read a contemporary critic of um that era, I guess, the Flashman books were considered like, you know, especially the first one. The first one is when he's the most like debauch, okay, in bed. Um and how horrible it is. How he's a despicable main character. Why would you read a book about this fucking guy? Whatever. Anyway, the books are
Right.
great, by the way.
The
So,
George McDonald Fraser
but
novels.
nobody, yeah, yeah. So, I've read the first three, but yeah, but at the time, no one was seriously critiquing these bodice rippers other than just dismissing them as like housewife porn, as tradition continues, right?
Right.
And there's no artistic value, so why bother? They're just you know for dumb women basically. uh but they are way way worse than the Flashman novels, and yet the
Right.
Flashman novels get a bad rap for how rapey he is, especially the first one. um it's interesting. And like going back to like my own writing, and all three of my books, it's really, really interesting the different types of feedback that I get from women versus men. Very, very different types of feedback. And it's funny too, because being a woman, uh, if I'm writing male main characters, I do want to get as much feedback from male readers as possible because I want to know if I'm doing a good job.
Right.
And there are certain parts of my books where a female reader has said things like, "You're writing this for the male gaze, blah 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 blah," and giving me shit. And then a male reader, I'll ask, I'm like, how accurate do you think I represented blah 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 blah? And they'll be like, "Oh, perfect." So kind of kind of interesting in like a
That is interesting.
sociological
That is
kind of way.
interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and the whole culture around it is interesting because
Mhm.
what is that crazy like fantasy series that's just porn? The Gore novels.
Oh yeah, it's all
like slave.
slave women and shit. I haven't read them, but yeah,
Me
they're
either, but
notorious. Yeah,
it's like the basically slave girls of Mars or
Tarnsmen of Gore or something like
yeah, and
that.
it's
Yeah,
basically like it's like the Barsoom, but
yeah, and all the covers are done by freaking oh my gosh, what is his name? Shit, I could picture the covers in my head.
yeah, they're very like that kind of
Uh,
thing.
yeah,
They're very
old
like
timey fantasy novels. Yeah,
they're very comic book guy rapey kind of vibe, and
yeah,
there's a lot of negative connotation with that. It's like, oh, gore, just
yeah.
pornography.
They were banned.
Yeah,
It's
but
funny because there's a
they're
lot of
tame compared to the stuff
they're
that's
so
sold at
tame
Barnes and
now.
Noble
Yeah,
now. And it's like,
yeah,
holy crap, like the people that would like 10, 15 years ago would joke on Reddit about how like pornographic those books were and misogynistic and stuff are straight up reading. Like there's this one novel that my wife is telling me about because her friend gave it to her or something, and it's basically like a Peter Pan and Wendy thing, and she basically gets raped by all the Lost Boys and shit, and that's the whole book basically,
nice.
you know.
Yeah,
And it's like,
fun.
yeah, okay, how is that?
Oh my God.
I mean, I
Yeah,
don't have a problem with it. I think it's whatever your thing's your thing, but
yeah.
ultimately, like, we've completely changed in our, the most obnoxious of the subgroup of people are like, I mean, dude on the planet raping women, bad. Women getting raped by the Lost Boys, romantasy. You know what
Well,
I mean?
here's here's why I think it's almost a good thing that a lot of these books are just generally dismissed by the wider reading public. Um, because I think these books, in a way, are, despite like the trigger warning shit and whatever, they are a safe way for women to explore scary shit. It's the same reason why we read horror novels.
Right.
It's the same reason why when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Goosebumps and stuff like that. Like my first main reading obsession, I had like every fucking Goosebumps book. And I was really into horror movies and all that stuff from like a young age. I think I told this story on the podcast before. When I was
Right.
in grade 6, I did a speech presentation on serial killers. And actually, right now, I'm wearing a funny shirt about the Zodiac killer. But anyway, uh, but yeah, so these books that are written by and for women, and this is something too, when those bodice rippers were first published in the 70s, it was almost like a feminist act to have a genre of novels written by and for women. Just, forget about the rape stuff. Okay?
Right.
But it's a safe way for women to explore things that fucking suck. And for women who have experienced these horrible events, it's a way of taking control. What happens with a lot of women is that they feel like they've lost control of their sexuality. And so either they go in extremes one way or another. They either never, ever, ever talk to another man ever again, or they become extremely promiscuous. So they've completely lost control of themselves.
Right.
And these books can be therapeutic for some women.
No, I
So
agree.
I think it gets and even myself who's being like a total apologist right now, and I make jokes about the books, I read the books, like I think we should be able to make fun of whatever we want to make fun of. And I think especially as someone who has read these fucking dumbass books, we should be able to laugh at ourselves as fans of these novels. Like I think some people take it way too seriously too. But
No, I agree.
yeah,
Like you can
I
only
think
read
overall,
serious literature. You can only read
yeah.
serious literature,
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm one of those people,
Like yeah. Yeah.
But I mean,
Like
I read everything.
yeah, there's some I at the end of the day, as far as like being a literature snob goes, I'm only on this earth for so many hours. And especially since having kids has really I DNF way more books. And so let's put it this way. I have a lot of abandoned projects. If if I publish a book and knowing that I am very like contrarian snob kind of, I have a lot of abandoned books. So if I've published a book, I have the confidence But there's something with these books, man.
Right.
And I have a lot of fun with them.
I mean, you should read what you like, and you should enjoy
Yeah,
what you like. And
yeah.
what's actually interesting. So like the whole psychological element of it is interesting because
Hmm.
uh, I've noticed in my not too long life that when it comes to women, I've noticed, and I could be wrong, but women tend to be very attracted to horror, uh,
Hmm.
crime stuff. There's that crime, the
True
true
crime.
crime
Yeah,
era.
yeah.
Very torture porny type stuff, which like my wife likes that. She's a horror, crime,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. She likes horror movies. I like horror movies that are like very psychological, and I like stuff like The Exorcist, like very like atmospheric,
Hmm.
spooky kind of masculine movies in a way,
Hmm.
She likes stuff like Saw and
Yeah,
the Rob Zombie splatter murder stuff,
yeah.
which I don't enjoy at all,
Hmm.
and it's interesting that in a way I think women do like reading about these kind of loss of control kind of situations, and I think
Hmm.
you're right. I think it does allow for a safe um safe like environment, and I guess maybe environment's not
Yeah,
the right, no, model, an intellectual model or emotional model
yeah, yeah.
to explore these feelings.
Well, that's another reason. Is like kids love dark stuff, and that's why I really feel like children's entertainment of the past like fucking 10, 15 years is way too, I don't know if tame is the right word. Basically, they're just acting like children are stupid and they can't handle anything. Kids are actually, one, they're way smarter than they're given credit for. And two, they do love dark stuff. They
Right.
love that.
My daughter loves horror. Every single
Yeah.
night, every single night when we go to bed, if I'm not reading to her, she goes, "Dad, Mom, tell me a scary story."
Hmm.
She doesn't want a fairy tale or she wants a scary story. She wants the most
Yeah.
horrible stories. I'm not very good at telling scary stories. My stories are adventure pirate type stuff, they're like boy
Hmm.
stories, right?
Hmm.
My wife tells the most dark ass stories, and I sit there listening to them, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, I'm gonna have a nightmare now, okay? Like,
Yeah.
calm down,
Yeah.
Like she invents some crazy stuff that I'm like, like I'm like, come on, dear, what are you
Hmm.
doing? It's like 10 o'clock at night. I gotta go to bed,
Hmm.
And that's the kind of stuff my daughter likes. She likes terrifying stuff, and she likes monsters
Yeah.
and vampires and everything, which I wasn't huge into growing up. I was into like aspirational adventure type stuff, like
Hmm.
that's kind of the stuff I was into. I was more into hobbits and knights and that type of thing and pirates than I was into monsters and vampires. It wasn't until my teen years that I got more into the horror stuff. So I think that there is definitely a sexual dimorphism in literary
Hmm.
taste,
Yeah.
and that's interesting. And I always think that reading a woman's perspective, a female
Yeah.
author, is very fascinating, and it's something that you can't ignore. I don't like the idea of the asexual book. I don't like that. I think that there's some women that can write male characters really well, and there's some that can't. And there's some,
Hmm.
Donna Tartt's actually an example where I don't particularly think she writes male characters very well, but they're still interesting. The book is still good, but some of her characters think like women,
You
if
know
that
who
makes
can't?
sense.
Do you know who cannot write male characters fucking at all?
Who's that?
Margaret Atwood. I, ugh, you want to talk about authors I can't fucking stand?
I can't stand her either. So
I can't stand it. I read Alias Grace and I wanted to fucking, I don't know how I managed to finish this book because I just said what like 2 seconds ago that I DNF books like crazy. Um, I don't know how I made it through the book. It was all the scenes from the man's perspective made me want to hurl the book out the fucking window. It was just bleh. Yeah,
just
no.
just
Some
garbage.
women just can't. Yeah, some women just can't write male characters at all. It's like they just have to put all of their hate of men into the character, like
Right.
like like a
They're like
like
straw
an
men.
Yeah, it's just me, bad man.
Yeah. Um,
That's
so besides romantasy and stuff, what
yeah.
else? What else are you reading? What else are you reading nowadays?
Oh, I'm actually I'm trying to claw my way out of this reading slump that I have been in.
I feel you.
Um, I have picked up I picked up a bunch of vintage books recently. And so I've been reading one of my favorite fantasy authors is Patricia A. McKillop. And instead of rereading one of the books of hers that I really like, I decided to read some that I haven't yet. So I'm working my way through the Riddle Master of Head series. I'm
Okay.
almost in the first book, and then I plan on reading the next one. But they're short. They're not like they're it's a trilogy in 1970s standards. So like the books aren't humongous fat like 90s fantasy.
Right.
Um, so I say trilogy, but it really could fit in all one.
One novel,
Yeah,
one
at this
modern novel. Yeah.
for modern standards. Yeah.
What else does she write besides the
Yeah.
Riddle Master of Head?
Um, one of my favorite books of hers is Song for the Basilisk.
Hmm.
Um, it's one of her newer ones. She died a few years ago, actually. Um, and Book of Etrix Wolf is another really, really good one. What I really like about Song of the Basilisk, or sorry, Song for the Basilisk, um, she has I if you like fairy tales, she writes novel length fairy tales. Like they're very, very fairy
Okay.
tale.
Okay.
Her prose is very dreamscapey.
I like that.
So yeah, so Song for the Basilisk is basically if actually a lot of her books do feature music in the magic systems, but especially in that one. So he basically uses music, like magical music, basically,
Hmm.
in his revenge tale. So the plot is pretty thin, but if you really sit down and think about like a fairy tale, like plots of a fairy tale don't exactly make a whole lot of fucking sense
Right.
either.
Right.
So the plot is thin, but the prose is really, really gorgeous. And yeah, that's my personal favorite one of hers.
Okay.
And The
Have you ever
Forest of
read
Sarah is
any?
another good one.
Have you ever read any Louis Louis Bujold or whatever? Louis McMaster Bujold?
I think I have, but I was really young, so I don't really remember.
I really liked her Curse of Shallian. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Hmm.
I enjoyed that. You know, my favorite fantasy author that's alive is one of your people. He's a Canadian,
Hmm.
and that's Guy Gabriel Kay.
Yeah. Yeah, he's good. I like
I
his
love
stuff
all.
too.
I think I've read all his novels, and they're very like they're one of those like fantasy adjacent kind of things,
Hmm.
you know, where
Yeah,
like
they're more like historical fantasy.
right, right.
Yeah.
And I think and they're pretty heavy on the romance and
Yeah.
low on the magic. I'm a low magic fan. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
will not read. I will not read Brander Sanderson or whatever. I don't have no desire to read about people chewing metal and like magic systems and shit like that. I can't fucking stand
yeah.
that. Like sends me into rage just thinking about it. You know.
Yeah. It appeals to people. Um I'm
Gotchas.
yeah, I a lot of it's really interesting when you talk to readers because everybody has their guilty pleasures kind of thing.
Right.
Or maybe not even guilty pleasures, but like they're pleasures and they like it. And even though they're extremely widely read and I respect their tastes in many, many ways, and then they'll be like, yeah, and I really, really like Brandon Sanderson. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna ignore that one.
Right.
I'm gonna ignore your recommendation for that one, but no, it's funny.
Well, right. You like when somebody recommends a book, you're like, oh, what else do you like? And you're like, oh yeah, like Name of the Wind is such a great book. And I'm like, well, obviously you're mentally challenged and lack discretion. So
Yeah,
get out of my house. Go out.
yeah,
I'm not taking your opinions, you know?
yeah.
Um, you know, no, I lost my train of thought because I was irritated about this fucking
Brandon
that book.
Sanderson.
Well, I've never
Yeah.
read, you know what, I'll be fair. I've never read any Brandon Sanderson at all.
I
But
tried to, but again, I had to DNF. I couldn't.
But it's interesting because like now like this whole fantasy thing is interestingly mainstream, but not mainstream. It's mainstream in a really weird way. It used to be like us nerds and weirdos were into like Lord of the Rings and like that
Hmm.
kind of thing. It's kind of how like a fantasy is having its like Star Wars moment, you know? And
Yeah,
okay,
it is. Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong because I know I've kind of shat on Star Wars a bunch in the last few like Substacks and stuff. Um, I feel like there's a weird strain. There was a weird level of Star Wars manufacturing around the 2000s, right? And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is I grew up being a nerd punk jock kind of guy, right? Where I was a little bit of both. I wasn't, I was into Dungeons and Dragons and like playing Magic the Gathering, but I was also into like punk music and like cool people and, did not nerdy things, right?
Hmm.
And we used to play Dungeons and Dragons in like middle school and then like go
Hmm.
smoke weed also in middle school, and
Hmm.
it was like Dungeons and Dragons wasn't something like you talked about, but I never remember anybody being into Star Wars. I mean, I knew of Star Wars. I remember seeing Star Wars in Eastern Europe when I was a little kid. My dad and mom took me to go see
Hmm.
like freaking Return of the Jedi, I believe. It was in theaters in like Romania for some reason. And I remember playing like the Super Nintendo video games, and I mean, but that was about it. There was like it was like it was like you couldn't buy Star Wars stuff at like the store. There was like no Star Wars merchandise at like Target. Um,
Hmm.
the only place I remember like where you could buy Star Wars stuff was at Disneyland at the Star Tours Star Wars ride like store.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden like the new one came out, right? The one with Jar Jar Binks or whatever, the Phantom Menace, right? And all of a sudden,
Hmm.
it was this like retro thing where every TV show and stuff had the Star Wars nerd in it. I
Yeah.
remember like the '70s show did a Star Wars episode,
Yeah.
and all of us there's just Star Wars stuff everywhere all of a sudden, and
Yeah.
it was like retro cool.
Yeah.
And then every store became full, and the whole like geeks are cool explosion with like the fucking that geek show or whatever.
Yeah.
And all that stuff came out, and then all of a sudden everybody loves Star Wars. Like you gotta love Star Wars. It became the greatest thing in the world. And I remember going, what the fuck? Like it wasn't like
Hmm.
nobody was into it for like the '90s. Like I don't think like I don't know. Am I crazy? Am I
No,
misremembering?
you're not. No, I'm just trying. I'm thinking back. Like, okay, so I was born in '87, so maybe I missed the big Star Wars shit. But my cohort was more about the freaking like He-Man and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and
Right.
stuff.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Ghostbusters, because there was a cartoon when I was a little kid.
Hmm.
It was like Power Rangers, that kind of thing. Maybe, and I feel like the first person that like I remember that had like there was um I went to high school with this guy, and he was the son of a very famous like punk rocker, in a punk
Hmm.
rock band. And he was like not like the Clash big, but like pretty big in the American punk scene, and on the West Coast, Orange County punk scene. And I remember
Hmm.
his dad he would throw parties at his house, and his dad was there, and like you'd always like run into these guys like, oh, you were in this band, and blah blah blah, right? I'm not gonna be like, oh, I'm not gonna tell you what it is, right? But and I remember going to this house, and this dude, he lived in a pretty like middle class house,
Hmm.
but he was this guy that would tour the world in a band, and he had this room of like Star Wars action figures. And this dude was
Hmm.
like early '80s punk rocker with a room full of Star Wars shit, right? And I
Yeah.
remember that was the first time I came across like that weird like alt person Star Wars thing, right? And then a
Hmm.
few years that shit exploded. Like every like hipster you met was like into Star Wars. And I'm like,
Hmm.
where did that come from? I don't remember at all.
Yeah, it was by the time I was in high school, Star Wars was everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere.
Yeah, it
It was
feels
weird.
strangely
I
like
think there was just
manufactured.
it was manufactured, I think, because of that the trilogy that came out then. and the resurgence of interest. And there was like, well, as far as my friends go, like my husband was playing freaking Star Wars Battlefront fucking all the time. We were having LAN parties
Right.
for Star Wars fucking Battlefront. So like, I got sick of that shit really fast.
And there was the MMO too. There was the Star
Yeah,
Wars
yeah,
Galaxies MMO that I remember people were
yeah,
into for a while. I don't know. It just feel like around the time I'd like it was in my early 20s, it just re-exploded, you know? So
yeah,
but there was a lot of like fuckery to it, I think. A lot of media manipulation and
for
Disneyland
sure.
went
Yeah, I
all
think so.
in.
I think you're right.
Yeah. It felt like, but now we talk about it like it was like this thing where like everybody was into it. I'm like, I don't remember. And and I lived
I think it's probably it could also just be the dorks that were really into Star Wars just shut up about it. They didn't talk about it because they get
maybe,
their ass kicked.
right, maybe, but now like Tiffany's like Star Wars, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I don't know. I don't buy it. There's nothing wrong. And look, I tried I tried watching Star Wars like a few years ago. And it fucking sucks. I'm sorry. Like the acting is horrible. The whole entire first movie, everybody goes, "Oh, the first one is the best." The first movie, the entire trilogy is held up by Harrison Ford. All right,
Hmm.
and the special effects, like the fun special effects. It's
Yeah.
just not a great movie. What's her name? Princess Leia. She's a horrible actress. She's a horrible
Carrie
actress.
Fisher.
Carrie Fisher is
Yeah.
horrible in those movies. Um, Luke Skywalker is insufferable. People always make fun of Frodo. I'm like, no, Frodo he has some pathos to him. Luke
Hmm.
Skywalker is just dull and boring the
Yeah.
whole show. The first movie was held up by Harrison Ford and what's his name, Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like it's just not that great. It's I don't
Hmm.
know. I always feel like it's crazy. Like I always felt crazy for going. Maybe because I was a Star Trek guy. Maybe that was it. Maybe because I like Star
Yeah.
Trek better. That could be it. But uh, at the same time, though, there is nothing wrong with it, right? And we were
Hmm.
talking about this offline, maybe a few weeks ago when I
Yeah.
had that conversation back and forth with Dave Green, where um, you know the slopification of fiction and entertainment
Hmm.
and that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people misunderstood me when I said that, right? Is that, maybe you grew out of it, right? Maybe that's
Hmm.
what it is. And I think I didn't mean that you shouldn't enjoy that kind of stuff, right? But I think that there's certain things that you enjoy at a certain time in your life. Um, like, okay, for example, right? In my mid 20s, I used to hang out in this neighborhood off of the street called 4th Street. We used to call it 4th Street, and it was a bunch of bars, and it was one of the best times of my life, right? All my
Hmm.
friends used to meet up at a coffee shop every Friday and Saturday around 7 o'clock. We'd have coffee, smoke cigarettes, chat a bit, and then we'd go bar hopping. And it was always a blast. And you'd always run into the same groups of people. It was all hipsters and flannel and like big frame glasses and stuff. And then we'd, bounce from, punk rock bar to skater bar to like, just all like there's like a series of bars, kind of like rockabilly type stuff.
Hmm.
And it was a blast. We used to do it every Friday, every Saturday. Like I would just burn brain cells on drinking Greyhound after Greyhound, Red Bull vodkas, and
Hmm.
all that stuff. And it was a blast. But
Hmm.
I can't go back there, right?
No.
Because it's not just about a place. It's not a location. It's about a place and a time, right?
Hmm.
I was at the right time of my life in the right place at the right time to
Yeah.
enjoy that environment. Right
Yeah.
now, if I go back to that area, it's not going to be the same. It's not the same people, and I am not the same person.
Hmm.
And I feel like when you enjoy certain media, that's how it is, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes when you're like 14 years old, Star Wars just hits the spot, man. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's right
Yeah.
there, or Lord of the
For
Rings,
sure.
or any of that stuff, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then you want to go back, but going back is, you know, the new Jedi or whatever, the new one, right?
Yeah.
And it's just not the same people, not the same place, not the
Yeah.
same vibes, and most of all, you are not the same.
That's
right?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't make the movie bad. I mean, I've never seen those new Star Wars movies, but like,
They're shit.
yeah, but
They're
let's
fucking
say
terrible.
Phantom Menace, for example, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of a shit movie to me, but by the time I saw
Hmm.
Phantom Menace, I was like, I think I was 19 or 20, and I was like, this is stupid. It's just not the
Hmm.
same place or time, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's a bad movie. And doesn't mean that like my 6-year-old brother, or, my 8-year-old
Hmm.
brother at the time didn't love it. He did. He
Yeah.
enjoyed it very much so, right? Because he was 8. He was at the right time at the right place
Yeah,
to do
exactly.
that.
Whenever I think of those movies, I think of my stepbrother at the time, my dad's girlfriend's son.
Right.
And he was a couple years younger than me, and he was really, really into it. So like, yeah, if you're not the target audience, it's probably gonna pass right over you and
Right.
you know.
In a way, I wasn't a target audience for Harry Potter when Harry Potter came out, right? I
Yeah.
was like the kid that was into older stuff, you know? And
Yeah.
then like I just didn't dig it. I was my thing, man, right? But now I am the target audience in a strange way, right? As in
Yeah. Through your daughter, yeah.
the
Yeah.
dad that can enjoy a movie with his daughter, you know?
Well, that's why I've seen, well, not all, I haven't seen the third one. I saw the first two of the new Star Wars ones.
Because
Oh
your
no,
kids
wait.
probably like it.
Because they were the target audience. But here's the thing, this is why I know that they suck. Despite my sons being the target audience, they
They didn't
still
like
thought
it.
it sucked. They
Yeah,
didn't
no,
like it at all.
exactly,
They
right?
weren't into it. I
Right.
think I think having them watch those actually ruined the rest of Star Wars for them
Right.
because they're like, is it going to be as lame as these ones? Like, no, it's not going to be as lame as those ones.
Right.
So yeah,
But in a way, and that's where the slop comes in. The slop is
yeah.
trying to force the experience out of the same stuff. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like they were trying to force the 1970s Star Wars in the 2000s,
Yeah.
2010s, and it just doesn't work because it doesn't have the same magic. You know what I mean?
No.
It's like going
Well,
to
everything that influenced Lucas, nobody's fucking heard of the maybe they've heard of the 70s like kitschy version of Flash Gordon, but they've never seen the original 30s serial version of Flash Gordon. So like they've never watched Buck Rogers, they've never read uh you know the old pulps, a
right,
lot of the stuff. Most people don't, unless you're a huge freaking art dork, you have no idea who Jean Giraud is. Like there's all this stuff that is missed by modern audiences that audiences in the 70s may have been like vaguely aware of, even if you weren't part of that scene. Like you remembered your dad being a fan of Buck Rogers, so you kind of like absorbed it through osmosis, kind of. But that was the 70s. This is now, it's not.
right.
Culturally, we're in a totally different place.
Well,
And but we need to pull from different influences, but there's not a whole lot that the current writers are pulling from to update Star Wars. And so it just becomes regurgitation.
right. And
Yeah, I don't
that's
know.
what I meant by there's an infantile kind of thing,
Yeah.
because uh, in a way, um, George Lucas took those 1950s like Sword and Planet kind of Buck Rogers type of stuff,
Yeah.
and he took those influences, and then he took uh, Akira Kurosawa's the
Yeah.
Hidden Fortress, and like Japanese samurai movies, and
Hmm.
pseudo Buddhism, and a bunch of inspirations, and he
Even
shoved it,
Western movies.
yeah, and Western movies, and he
Hmm.
updated it for this new Hollywood
Hmm.
feel. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
He took something old and updated it to be new, right? He
Well,
never,
even Indiana Jones is inspired by old pulp novels that
right,
nowadays nobody's fucking heard of any of these adventure stories from the 30s and 40s that, Lucas was
right.
reading.
But he was trying to make something new
Hmm. Hmm.
using the old, right?
Yeah.
He was updating, he was bringing forward, he was taking his inspirations, and growing, right? There's a growth in themes, in style and presentation, right?
Hmm.
These new guys, right? These new Star Wars, they were just trying to make Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like beat for beat Star Wars, A New Hope,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And it just regurgitates it and
Right.
just it just
Didn't take
it's kind of like,
inspirations. There's nothing there. It was
yeah.
basically a simulacra of a much better movie, It was it was like it would be like if George Lucas was like, I really like cowboy movies and made a cowboy movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He liked
Yeah.
cowboy movies, but didn't make a cowboy movie. He made a cowboy movie in space.
And I think it almost becomes a curse too, because I'm thinking right now of the fantasy genre, right? There's so much like Tolkien copycats and things like that, right? And it has the same problem, but it gets to the point where the genre becomes so incestuous, new readers expect so much sameness that when an author tries to do anything different, they're shit on. So it becomes like this kind of like curse. And then that's when you start seeing the genre feeling really stale and stagnant and
Right.
like
Right.
boring because you can't like an agent is not going to sign a fantasy novel that is too different.
Right.
They're all going to be wanting to sign the same books basically over and over and over again.
Right. It's got to have it's got to hit
Yeah.
these widgets, these
Yeah.
like outline points, right?
Yeah.
And it does. It creates a very incestuous kind of stagnant,
Hmm.
infantile like slop, right? And that's where
Yeah.
you get slop. Because the problem with a lot of media today, whether it's television, movies, any of that stuff, is that there is no growth in the intellectual capabilities of this our generation. We are stunted in a way, right?
Yeah.
We never went and read past Star Wars, or
Yeah.
watched past, not all of us, of course, there's tons of us that
Hmm.
have, but a lot of the stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's become a point where we're now referencing things that reference other things,
Yeah.
and it's consistently stuck where there's no inspiration and there's no forward movement.
Yeah.
Now, now, one thing that we don't talk about in our circles when it comes to art and creativity and movements and stuff is that the 20th century, stylistically, in its output of fiction and movies and everything, is really unique. All right, it is
Hmm.
a unique time, right? Never in the history of Western civilization or the world, right? Has there been so much entertainment and fiction and art been
Yeah.
produced, right? Like you look at the output of like one year in like 1975 or whatever, and
Yeah.
it outdoes the entirety of the Renaissance, right?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
we have more stuff from one year in the 60s, music wise, than we have from the entire historical record of music and entertainment in the history of Western civilization.
If you
Right?
just look at the number of books on Amazon that get published every day,
Right.
there's a lot.
Right.
We are not starving for entertainment.
Right. And there is the mid to late 20th century, right, was
Hmm.
a unique time of the the mediums that were available: television, film,
Yeah.
the easy to print, mixed with the industry being available, right? Like a
Hmm.
positive economic growth with the ability to pay authors and to create, popular authors and
Hmm.
massive publishing houses and that kind of stuff, mixed with, film studios, television studios, all this stuff all kind of came together. And because our culture at that time, really until the internet shattered everything, it was all funneled through a cohesive empire of, like attention, right?
Hmm.
Like you had all this media, but you also had people that could curate and only present some of it to the mass audience, right?
Yeah.
Which no longer exists. Like people always say, oh, there's no good music nowadays. I'm like, yes, there's tons of good music. You don't know, right? There
Yeah.
was tons of music, outside of Nirvana and Pearl Jam in the 90s, right? That you've never even
Hmm.
heard of, right? But you only listen to that stuff because that's what was played on K Rock.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Monocultures are just dead.
Right,
And so you actually have to put in the effort to find new good shit. And
right,
that's where things like it's one of the reasons why things like podcasts and Substacks or blogs or whatever is possible because you can actually follow an individual who you develop trust their opinion of, I guess,
Right.
and get your recommendations that way, or just being part of like I don't know, a fucking Discord community or whatever.
Right. And
And that's
it's
how,
it's funny
it's
because
become all word of mouth. Everything is word of mouth. And by the way, especially for indie content, I hate the word content, but okay, so like I have my books out, a lot of people listening or people you've interviewed, a lot of people have books out or they have their Substacks or whatever. Okay, word of mouth is so freaking important because that's how a reader gains trust in a book or movie or music or whatever it is.
right.
And so if you don't have the PR team, right, if you're not constantly seeing advertisements for the thing, word of mouth really is king. If someone says to you, this book is really good, you're not going to care who published it, but your friend said the book was good. And so you might give it a chance.
Or you might just buy
Word of
it.
mouth, or you might, yeah. Um, so that's a totally side rant there. But because there is just so much. There is just so much. How are you supposed to filter it all?
Right.
And like obviously I'm contributing to the problem because I am a self-publisher. And there's just so much. There's so much. And so word of mouth is really,
It's critical.
really vital. Yeah.
So in that piece, I don't know if you read it, the one I wrote and then the one Dave Green wrote, he talks about like and I like Dave Green a lot, and I said that in
Hmm.
my piece, and I actually want to invite him on the podcast because I think him and I would have a good
Hmm.
conversation. He said something along like, in the '90s there was some great music like Nirvana and blah 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 or whatever, right? Well, yes and no, right?
Hmm.
The mid to late '90s was fucking atrocious for music. I don't know if people have rose tinted goggles that they're wearing, but like Sugar Ray was not a good band, okay?
Yeah.
Especially around the 2000s, music was
Jesus.
fucking awful. I don't know who the hell thinks that music was good. Like Limp Bizkit and that shit was not good. I'm sorry, guys. All right, it was trash. I know a lot of people like that stuff
Yeah.
right now, but it was mad garbage. All right, and that's
A lot of that is just pure nostalgia
right,
because
right,
okay, so I was the target audience for that shit. And
right.
so I had a Limp Bizkit CD and I had a Marilyn Manson CD and I wound up
I too own
growing out
those
of it.
CDs. Yeah,
Yeah, I pawned all my CDs. There's only a couple CDs that I pawned that I actually do regret. Um, but yeah, all that fucking like new metal garbage.
right.
That was time and place. That total that genre could not have existed at any other period of history,
Right.
really. Like it
No,
was zeitgeist.
it was like that, right? But what's interesting is that when I lived in that era, first of all, I
Yeah.
liked Marilyn Manson. I still think some of his songs are bangers. Early
He
Marilyn
has a couple
Manson,
good bangers, yeah.
early Marilyn Manson and the
Yeah.
Spooky Kids, that
Yeah.
stuff is great. I don't care. That first
I still like
album,
Rob Zombie. Actually, out of all of them, I think I probably listened to Rob Zombie still the
that
most of
that
all that shit.
you and my wife would get along because she's a Rob
Yeah.
Zombie fan. I never really dug
Yeah.
him, but man, and then you know what? One of his last albums is actually really good.
Hmm.
The one that's got the Mistopheles of Los Angeles and stuff on it. He's pretty good. He's actually playing a show here, like close to me in Atlanta, a few hours
Oh yeah.
away from me. More, it's
Yeah.
like I want to go, and it's sold out. I was like, oh, I would have gone to see
Yeah.
Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
Um, but I never really dug that era when I was living in it, right?
Hmm.
I was the weirdo, okay? I was that guy that
Hmm.
like I liked 80s music, I listened to like fucking Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and the Cure and Susie and the
Hmm.
Banshees and all this stuff, right? And you did not hear that stuff on the radio, all right?
Yeah.
Remember in the 90s, you listened to the
Hmm.
radio. In Los Angeles, we had KROQ, right? K Rock,
Hmm.
right? Where the Dr. Drew show originally comes from, and Adam Carolla and
Hmm.
those guys. And yeah, you listen to whatever the hell those guys played, right? And it was basically MTV type stuff.
Yeah.
And you liked it. You know what I mean? You listened to No Doubt because that's what was on the
Excuse
freaking
me.
radio.
Yeah.
Um, but if you really wanted to listen to stuff, you had to get into like a scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
you had to know somebody who could recommend stuff. Like
right,
when I was living, when I was that age, I was exposed to a lot of varied music because I was living in a rental house Like my mom owned the house, but all the rooms were rented out. And some of our renters were musicians. And there was one guy, he had a huge, probably the biggest CD collection I think I've ever seen. In one bedroom size. Anyway, like stacks and stacks of CDs took up half the room. And he would just like, he's like, "Oh, you're into music? Here, listen to this, listen to that," you know.
Right.
So that was cool.
And
He was a
that's the guys
crackhead
we
too,
need.
whatever.
That's the guys we
Yeah,
need, you
yeah.
know? They're often creeps and weirdos, but that's okay, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I have some stories. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And I remember there was
Yeah.
this guy, his name was, I'll call him R, right? And he was an older guy. He's older than me by a few years. And I
Hmm.
met him when I was in high school. And, he's the guy that's like, hey, have you ever listened to Susie and the Banshees and goth music? Let's go to a
Yeah.
goth club, you know? And I was like, oh my God, what the
Yeah.
fuck? This is amazing, you know? And then I would drive for hours to go find that weird record store that only like sold goth music, you know, from like the
Yeah.
80s, right? Or like new wave stuff and that sort of thing, right? And that's that was kind of my normal, you know. And once we
Yeah.
got into the age of the internet, that became that fun of finding stuff, or like somebody giving you a CD, like a burnt
Hmm.
CD, back him and listen to this. This is really cool, you know.
Hmm.
That disappeared and it got replaced by Spotify, and first it was Pandora and LimeWire and all that
Kids,
stuff.
kids these days are trading playlists.
Right, they are trading
Yeah.
playlists, and I think it's
Yeah.
kind of cool. But it's now, in those kind of eras, those music, there were scenes, right? You were into punk
Yeah.
rock, and they had stupid rules and like
Hmm.
kind of like of like ethics, and that type of
Yeah.
thing, right? Like
Hmm.
norms and stuff, right? What I'm
Hmm.
seeing right now is I'm seeing the same thing happen in the book world, right?
Yeah.
Where now instead of, oh, I'm a dude that reads fantasy, it's like I'm a fantasy reader.
Yeah. It's
That's
more of an identity. Yeah.
that's my
Yeah.
identity. I'm gonna put dragons and shit, and I have a tattoo of my favorite like line and stuff, and
Hmm.
it's like an identity. And with that kind of identity comes all the negative stuff too, which is
Hmm.
excommunications and, oh my God, this author called somebody something and now he's too racist or too sexist or she's too blah blah blah. And every single one of these fantasy type scenes explodes into
Yeah.
idiotic freaking nonsense that is so
Yeah.
tiresome, right? Because it's like the cool kids table, but all the cool kids are ugly dorks in a way.
Yeah.
You
Oh
know what I mean?
God. Yeah.
Right. So it's like it's just like, holy crap, I don't want to get into that, And of course,
And it becomes so humorless. Like I was saying before, you got to be able to acknowledge and be able to laugh at yourself. If you can't laugh at yourself, then what the fuck are you doing?
right,
You
right.
know,
It,
we all
it's
know fantasy is a goofy ass genre, but we love it. I mean, I read it, it's great, but it is kind of stupid. It's fucking dumb.
right,
But
but
a lot of these people, they because it is their personality, they can't laugh at it. They
right,
can't engage with it in any sort of critical way because it's almost like they're criticizing themselves, which
right.
is really kind
And,
of
and it's
rude, you know.
interesting because I've always like, I don't know. I don't look like the kind of person that, is into geeky shit, I guess, right? But I've
Hmm.
always been into geeky shit. I love Dungeons and Dragons and I like
Yeah.
all that stuff, right? But I've never felt like I needed to define myself by the kind of things I enjoy.
Hmm.
I look, bro, I can spit out some Dungeons and Dragons cred, okay? I can look behind me on my shelf and I've got crates of like second edition on Dungeons and Dragons books. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
can tell you all about the Forgotten Realms and like freaking all that crap, and I know
Hmm.
all the rules by heart, even though I haven't played in like over a decade. But I don't define myself by that.
Hmm.
I don't feel like I need to. That's a thing I enjoy.
Yeah.
In the same way I enjoy reading, in the same way I enjoy writing, in the same way I enjoy, what we're doing right now, which is
Hmm.
podcasting and movies and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I don't want to be part of your scene, if that makes sense. I don't
Yeah.
want to be invited. I've never had the desire to go to a convention to hang out with people that like the
No,
same
that does
shit I
not appeal to me either. Like for one, I don't like leaving the house anyway. So
do.
so the idea of going to one of these conventions or something is like I would rather not. Yeah.
Right. I think some people that are into writing and reading,
Mhm.
which tends to be a lot of people are into both at the same time, tend to really be more into liking the idea of being into reading and writing so they can be part of something,
Yeah.
you know?
Well,
And
it's
that's
a, it's a lonely hobby. Reading and
right.
writing is a very lonely hobby,
And
right?
that's the vibe I get
So,
from the convention crowd, you know?
yeah.
Like, let's all hang out and stuff. And then drama happens. And then it's
Yeah.
like, but why? Can we
Yeah.
just talk about elves and dwarves and shit, bro? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah,
want to talk
exactly.
about, you know?
Yeah.
I think that independent fiction, independent writing is the key, and I think that that's where
Yeah.
the best stuff is. I
Yeah.
think that ultimately, in a way, like the big companies have to embrace the whole, the whole scene kind of concept,
Hmm.
Um, but in the world of the internet, you have to adapt and you have to be able to, you got to find your niche and you got
Hmm.
to like find your fans. And I think that for the first time in history is like you have the ability to get your stuff out and you have the
Yeah.
ability to self
Chris
promote.
Bezos.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
you just, you just have to do it. Yeah, what do you think about that? What do you think about the Chris Bezos fantasy line thing or whatever?
The what?
The not the Chris Bezos, who started the new like publishing thing? I think
I
Larry
don't know.
Correia is like writing for him and stuff.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah,
Peter
yeah, yeah. I know
Peter
what you're talking
Thiel,
about.
the Peter Thiel fantasy thing.
I really don't have much of an opinion on it. I think that's the one that kind of broke off from like Bane.
Hmm.
The
Yeah, I
power to
believe
them,
so.
I
Yeah,
guess.
that's
You know,
cool,
the more
man.
the merrier.
Right,
You need more of everything. We just need more. Yeah, I don't really have an opinion. I haven't been keeping up to date with that one.
right. I've never been a huge fan of Bane, to be honest. Like I'm supposed to, because it's like,
Hmm.
oh, there are guys or whatever. Never liked their shit. Everything I've read from most of the big names, I'm like, well, whatever. It's not my thing. It's like it's
Well, what's
too,
really I have the same opinion of like Bane has their niche, and that's cool. And then there's publishers like Tor and Orbit and Angry Robot. The one thing about Bane is at least you can tell that it's a Bane book. When you look at all other like big sci-fi fantasy publishers, they all are just the same.
right.
I don't know. There's no I don't know.
There's no
They're
no
just they're two the same.
their vibe is the
Yeah.
same. I used to be more into fantasy and I would read all the,
Mhm.
Hugo and Nebula award stuff. And I just got to the point where I'm like, this is just not for me. I read a
Mhm.
Hugo Nebula winner and I think Memory of Light or something like that. It was one of those like it was like
Mhm.
this Byzantine Empire kind of sci-fi thing, and it was just pure trash. I was like, oh my, it wasn't a good book. It wasn't that it was like woke or annoying, which it was, but it just wasn't good. On top of that, it was like, yeah, this is dumb.
Well,
This is
that's the thing too, is that like I've read books from people with all sorts of different politics, and I don't really care as long as you do it well, like and like just be good at it, you know?
right, right. I
Some
mean,
of these books just genuinely fucking suck. And it also just is extra annoying when they're trying to shovel their politics down your throat from the right or the left, you know?
right. No,
Be
absolutely.
good. Be
I've
good,
read
and then you can write
some
whatever politics you want.
cringy ass shit from right wing authors. I'm like, Bane's pretty guilty of that, where it's like, oh, this is just as bad as the Tor stuff. It's just from a
Yeah.
different perspective, and it's just equally obnoxious.
Hmm.
And it's just not very good. So that's kind of why I just read Welbeck now, and
Yeah.
I'm like, listen, I'd rather just be depressed than irritated. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Depression is a much better feeling than irritation in my worldview.
Yep.
And that's why I'm going to read your books instead because they don't irritate me or only slightly depress me. So it's always good. Um,
That's good.
but yeah, like I feel like we are in a weird spot right now.
Hmm.
We need something new. There's a feeling of antsiness, I guess, or
Hmm.
a literary anxiety, whether it's in science fiction, fantasy, or any of the genres. There's something missing. There's a like a I feel like there's something bubbling beneath the surface, and we need something new and real to pop out, like a new
Yep.
genre or something, or something
Well,
new.
I think that's where like the like some sort of uh like word of mouth. Okay, so going back to that, if you're following somebody, whether it be someone on a forum or Substack or a YouTube channel or whatever, and you start trusting their opinions, like I said, like if they recommend something, you're not going to say, "Oh, but it's not published by Tor." That's how a lot of self-published clicks really get going is there's somebody who says, "Hey, this book's actually really good, and also this book is really good, and this
Right,
book's really good."
right,
And people will pick them up and read them. And that's where a lot of the big self-publishing successes happen is just by people who have no stake in it, like they are other readers telling other readers, hey, read this book, right? And I
right.
think that's where I think there's a lot of people who are almost like afraid to review self-published books. And I think that's really bizarre. It is definitely something, I don't know if it's fear, but there's some bizarre psychological thing that is stopping people from critiquing self-published books. I don't know why. And the only time I ever see somebody give like critique is if it's like
Really bad or really good.
uh really really bad or really really good. Yeah.
Right.
Like there are some books from prominent booktubers that get a lot of attention because people are fans of the YouTube channel, but then they actually read the book and the book's actually like,
Just garbage or mediocre.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so those books will get attention. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's really weird because like if you go to a forum, there's and never mind that, but there's a lot of forums and stuff like or subreddits or whatever, and you're not allowed to self-promo. So how do you talk about your book? And so a lot of people will assume that if someone's suggesting a self-pub book that they're using like an alt account to promote it and it's like are you or you must be friends with them. It's fucking weird. It's so weird. So
Right.
like when I get a review from someone who's like a total stranger, that's really it blows my mind that it's like makes you feel really, really cool.
Right.
When it's
Right.
I have no idea who this person is and they just reviewed my book and like that's wild. It's really cool.
It is really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
it's cool when people leave comments about this, this podcast. I love it. And
Yeah. I've seen it in the wild a couple times actually.
yeah,
And
and
I'm always like, you know, good
yeah,
job.
I love it when I hear somebody
Proud of
mention
you,
this
buddy.
pod. Yeah, I love it when
Yeah.
I hear somebody mention this podcast on a different podcast. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, that's me. Hey, that's
Yeah.
cool. Like somebody actually
Yeah.
was into something or the one thing I love the most about this podcast is I love it
Hmm.
when I talk about a book or I recommend a novel or a movie
Hmm.
and somebody reads it and really likes it, right? And I go,
Yeah.
there you go. That's why I'm doing this. I want people to read and share. I want to share the stuff I
Yeah.
love with people. But
Hmm.
you are right about the criticism thing, right? I think one problem is that we have a dearth of critics. And what I mean by that is that I don't think people understand what literary criticism actually is, or
Yeah.
even
It's not
film
necessarily
criticism.
tearing a book apart.
Right. The point of criticism is you're not telling somebody I liked it or I didn't like it, right? That's
Hmm.
a review. That's
Yeah.
a personal review. I like that.
Hmm.
A good critic can explain what it's about and
Yeah.
where the work of art fits into the historical and kind of like cultural milieu of the entirety of the medium, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, they can say, well, and then this is why I didn't like it or it didn't work for me. You know, I can tell you that there are movies that are fantastic or books that I've read that are well written that I just didn't like. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean it's a bad book. It doesn't mean it's a
Hmm.
bad movie, right? There might be perfectly, proficient movies. I can tell you why they succeeded as this movie and why they're a good
Hmm.
movie because they succeeded as a movie, but I also why I did not like it, you
Hmm.
know? And the problem is that a lot of people are very niche and they're not well read or well watched in movies, you know?
Hmm.
So they go, oh, I like that. They have like pet things that they like. And if they don't, if the work of art doesn't
Yeah.
meet those little pet things, they hate it, which is
Yeah.
completely silly, right? You know, a
Hmm.
good critic can be objective and also bring in like a full historical understanding. A critic should be the most well-read person, period. Or the most
Yeah.
well-read, or the
Hmm.
most, well-watched, or whatever, right? Or well listened to when it comes to
Hmm.
music, and they have to understand both the past that it was built upon. I get this a lot with music, right?
Hmm.
You know, I go, oh, look, I'm a big fan of. Okay, I'll use a pretty big example that everybody should know, right? I like Chapel Roan, right? I think Chapel
Yeah.
Roan is great, right? And I'm always like, Chapel Roan's really good. She's a great. It's probably one of the best albums of 2024. It's a fantastic pop album. It's great, right?
Hmm.
And then people go, "Oh yeah, well that's just gay," and you should listen to this. And they like always share some like metal band or something like that, right? Well,
Yeah.
dude, that's fucking cool that you're sharing this metal band from a decade ago, right? But that's
Yeah.
irrelevant to it. What you're telling me is you don't like pop music, right?
Yeah.
And you don't understand pop music and you don't understand contemporary music and you're sharing your niche thing, right? It's like me saying, Lord of the Rings is awesome, right? It's
Yeah.
fantastic. I loved it. I love he's a great fantasy writer. And then somebody goes, yeah, I mean, that was lame, but you should read this. And here's Hemingway, right? Oh, yeah, they're fucking both good, but they're in a completely different
Yeah.
universe, right?
Yeah.
And what people don't understand is like when I say I like Chaperone, right? One, I like her because she is a pop musician, right?
Hmm.
What is she doing in the history of pop music, right? You have to look at, and the fact that if you listen to her music, you realize that she is well versed in 80s, 70s, and 90s pop music because there's
Yeah.
echoes of everything from Madonna to Prince to weird, like, ballads that sound like Berlin's Take My Breath Away, slow ballads. There's samples and rhythms that are completely taken from like uh, 1980s like cheerleader music. There's all kinds of like in there, in cabaret music and
Yeah.
drag queen music, and you have to take into account everything, right? You
Yeah.
know, you can't say that, oh, I don't like Prince. Prince sucks because I listen to Led Zeppelin. Well, yeah, it's okay to like Led Zeppelin over Prince, but
Yeah.
Prince does not suck.
Hmm.
You know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with, and that's what being a good critic is you have to be
And you have to be
able,
able to have objective
right,
analysis. Yeah.
objective analysis and a full grasp and understanding of the plethora of influences, both, present, contemporary, and past, right?
Hmm.
And the music cannot be pastiche, right? I think that's a big problem right now, is that we are
Hmm.
stuck in endless pastiche. And when I say that there's a level of literary anxiety, because there's nothing new, everything that comes out is a kind of a pastiche of something else.
Yeah.
I remember, like, do you remember that? Do you remember that? I was very critical of this, right? And I'm gonna get some. I think I'm gonna get some shit, right? And I'm gonna talk some shit on some people, right? Do you remember like the Pulp Rev crowd?
I'm aware of them.
Right. So they were all cool dudes, right? A lot of them were really cool.
Hmm.
And the whole idea, they're like around the Kursova magazine type thing, right?
Yeah.
And they're all about going back to that Pulp Fiction vibe and blah, 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 right? Yeah,
Hmm.
that's cool, bro. That stuff was awesome. And please share it. Share those old stories with me, right? But you cannot write fucking Conan pastiches forever. You
No.
know, at that point, you are just doing the same exact thing those guys that made the new Star Wars movies are doing,
Yeah.
right? You're not saying anything new because Conan was a product of his contemporary, of Robert Howard's contemporary time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're just making a pastiche. Conan does not, you have to update Conan to the 21st century if you're going to do it. And I don't mean like the character himself, I mean the thematic qualities of it, right? The only person that does a really good job of it is Sky, Shiler
Yeah,
Hearns.
he's, you know what? Yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever he puts out
Well,
next.
he's
Yeah.
got a novel coming out soon. He's gonna come
I
on.
heard about that.
He's
I'm
gonna
very
come.
excited.
He's gonna come on a podcast, I think.
He
And
better.
that dude's a beast, man. He is his own person. He's a prime example of the coolest dude ever. You know why? He doesn't do scenes. Nobody knows about him. He's not on Substack. You know,
And yet,
he's got
and yet.
Instagram.
Yeah. Oh, does he?
Yeah, he just shares weird drawings.
Cool.
I'll share it with you.
Yeah, let me know. I'll follow him.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, I think I've told this story before too. So apologies if I'm being repetitive, but I first heard of his stuff through um DMR books because
The metal
they
guys. The metal guys.
yeah, that's pretty much all they publish is like metal guys fantasy books. It's
Yeah.
great. Power to 'em. It's good. I love them. They interviewed me. One of the first times I've ever been interviewed was actually through DMR books. So I love those guys. But
I love them too. I'm a big fan of their stuff.
yeah. But yeah, so Skylar was in an anthology, and then so they when Fools or Thune's Vision, sorry,
Hmm.
came out, they were promoting that. And
Right.
so that's how I found out about him. And then how long later, when was that? What year was that? So I started Substack in 2023 anyway. So it feels like a long time between that stuff happening and me joining Substack. And then I joined Substack, and all of a sudden I'm in contact with people who actually fucking like knows who this guy is. Like this random, it's really cool. Like the internet's really cool that way.
It
Like the
is.
internet is really cool that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll tell you my story about Sky. I actually,
Yeah.
he was in the first few, he had a story in the first few issues of Kirsova magazine. You remember those
Hmm.
guys?
Yeah.
He still publishes that. Kirsova's one of those guys where like, I like the magazine. I fully support it, and I throw him money every time. It just hit that scene is not my vibes. I like what they
Hmm.
do. It's not for me. But in the early issues, it was for me, and it was Sky was kind of like, I
Hmm.
remember reading one of his stories, and it was one of the ones that I think ended up in Thune's vision, maybe not. And I'm like, man, I'm like, this guy's fucking great. You know what I mean? I'm like, dude, this dude gets it, right? He's
Yep.
writing this stuff where it's like, it feels like, Vance, and it feels like, it feels like that era of like heavy
Hmm.
metal, but it also
Yeah.
is like very contemporary at the same time, and he's addressing some contemporary issues.
Hmm.
um my favorite story of his is this really weird like Little Red Riding Hood story that he wrote, called the Honor of Wolves or something like that. I'll have to share
Hmm.
it. And I think he like doesn't really publish it out. He doesn't keep putting it out as much. But and I think I sent him an email or something. I was like, "Hey man, like really liked your stuff." And then we ended up talking, and he was in the military, and I was in the military, and we started talking about like war stuff, and and
Hmm.
then we hit it off, and he introduced me to some of those guys that went on to start Pylon Press, and
Hmm.
we've been God, we've been like online friends, fuck man, for like before my daughter was born, so like 8 9 years now, right? And
Hmm.
actually, he's one of the people I've met in person, actually. That I actually, it wasn't
That's
we.
cool.
I was in his area up north, and I visited him, and we talked, not about fiction at all. We talked about other stuff, and it was
Hmm.
good stuff. And he's just one of these guys that like he's your quintessential like dude that like is not he doesn't give a shit about being like an author. He doesn't want to like be invited to like the author club or go to the convention or
Yeah.
anything like that. He likes his shit. He likes what he likes, and he puts out the stuff that he thinks is good by his own standards, and that's it. That's what I love
Yeah,
about
that's I totally that's exactly what I do too.
it.
Like
Right.
if I don't enjoy reading it, why would anybody else? So the books that I put out are the books that I legitimately have read over and over again, and I would still reread them,
Right.
in my opinion.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
mhm,
And I think that a lot of these scenes they get lost in people wanting to be
mhm.
like Mark Lawrence. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They're more into the contest and being the moderator on the forum than they are really into the fiction writing or the enjoying fiction type of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And they're more into like the signifying that I'm part of this crew and here's my next novel that's just like the other one because that's what we're pushing. You know, this is our
Hmm.
thing. You know, when really you should be able to like drop a Star Trek slash Twilight Zone novel and then follow it up with the space opera or follow it up with the planet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? In a way that
Yeah.
I like that you're bouncing around in subgenres and stuff because that's what you're like fuck it I want to do this. I want to move on to something else. I want to write a
Hmm.
romantasy next. Why? Because that's what I'm into today,
Yeah.
and I like that. And I like that there's a freedom to do that, and
Hmm.
maybe eventually all of us will break into the greater scene, but until then we're just going to read and enjoy and have a good time and not give a fuck what anybody cares about the whole
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
that's
Pretty
the way to
much.
be.
Yep.
All right, Lisa, so what's next? What are you writing next? What are you going to write us next?
Oh, well, like I was saying before, as far as novels go, um, I've got a few ideas. Ideas are easy, execution is hard. So, uh, after this one, you guys are going to be as surprised as I am. Whatever I do as far as novels go, I am working on stuff. I write every day. I don't always publish it on Substack. Actually, I've been really slacking in that department. Um,
Yeah, you're going to get banned from the Shire Stack circle if
oh
you.
my God.
I mean,
Jesus.
let's talk shop. We're gonna
Yeah.
cut it soon, but let's talk shop real fast, right?
Yeah.
Are you an outliner? How do you write? Do you
No,
plot
I am not
everything
an
out?
outliner. I pants. I have to know my characters very, very well. If I'm not engaged with my characters, um, then I really struggle to feel attached to a project. Most of the books that I have abandoned, it's because I don't feel connected to the characters.
Okay.
So character to me is first and foremost, and then the plot evolves from what they do. Uh, I did outline Palace, but I ended up rewriting so much of it that like it didn't matter. So
So
yeah.
you just write, and then go back and try to piece something out of it, or you
So
just
what
kind of
I
flow.
I will write the first draft in one go. I don't delete anything as I'm writing the first draft. All the bullshit, the really dumb sections. Like I'll even write it even if I know I'm going to cut it. I'm like, this is really stupid. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm writing this. But I will finish the thought and I will continue on as if like knowing I'm going to cut that part, I still continue on.
Okay.
And then I finish the first draft. I set it aside for several months, like so that I'm really looking at it with fresh eyes. And in the meantime, that's why I have the four books that I really wrote like back to back to back. So while that one first draft is resting, I'll move on to another book and do another first draft. And then when I'm done that first draft, I'll go back and I'll do the second draft of the other book. And so I'll kind of like flip back and forth. But now that Ghosts is out in the wild, um, like I said, that's the last of my pre-Substack books. And since joining Substack, the pressure is on to really like I want it's this is it is the best writers space that I have encountered in many, many, many years. It's like
Right.
Substack has a lot of fucking talent. Like there's that saying where if you want to get better, surround yourself with people who are like way outside your league. That's what I feel like Substack is in a lot of ways. There's a lot of very talented people on there. Um
Do you read a lot of fiction on Substack?
I try to. I do believe that that's part of the reason why I've not been finishing as many novels is because I'm reading more Substack fiction.
Right.
I recently also I'll shield this as well. I recently was part of a Substack or sorry, a Twilight Zone kind of retro not retrospective, what's the word I'm looking for? Tribute. A Twilight Zone tribute on Substack, a bunch of different authors. And that evolved to now the guys who kind of hosted that project. I'm be getting in a printed anthology. It's called the Midnight Vault, and I think it comes out on the 15th.
I think I saw that. I
I'll have
think
to look that up.
I read your
Yeah.
piece in there too.
Yeah.
You know who's
But there's a lot of really good stories in that. Like
it,
there's a lot of really good stories
everything
in
I've
that.
read from that is pretty good. You know who's
Yeah.
dropping bangers? Freaking Alexander Helene, man. He's dropping
Yes, he is. Yeah.
his last story
Yeah.
with the superhero guy, and I was like,
Hmm.
oh man, that's good.
Hmm.
He's hitting that contemporary thing. It's very like pop but tongue in cheek in a way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, he's coming.
Hmm.
He's, I've liked his old stuff, but I feel like
Hmm.
I can see his writing
I can
develop
I
into a
yeah, he is
voice.
growing.
Yeah,
He is he's definitely growing, and it's really really interesting watching Ball's
yeah.
growth
He's
through
getting
the
very
medium. Yeah.
disgruntled, and it's fantastic. I love it. I'm like, hell yeah,
Hmm.
keep writing. Give me that
Yep.
crazy shit, bro. Put it
Yep.
out. I should probably write more on Substack. I've
You should.
written, I've got that one fiction side Substack, and it's just my stuff. I'm so depressed all the time.
Well, then just to write something sad.
you
I've
know,
actually, it's funny because speaking of Helene, and we've talked about this, him and I before. He stopped doing his political essays and like his like talk pieces to
right?
focus on fiction. And then here I am, I've done the fiction thing since I started my Substack, and then like the last few things that I've posted other than like a couple poems have been like um I wrote the thing about the movie The Wrestler, and then I wrote about my road trip, and like so I'm kind of going
In the
the
opposite
other
direction.
way.
Yeah,
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 let's try some more thinky stuff rather than feely stuff, I guess. I don't know. It's
yeah.
different. But
And that's
I yeah, I do plan on posting more short stories and stuff like that too.
that's the tough part, right? Is because on one end you have to work on building a platform for yourself, and doing what
Hmm.
interests you. So you get stuck kind of arguing about, media and stuff on Substack and Twitter and that
Hmm.
kind of thing. And each time I spend, writing a quick essay about, that's 2, 3 hours not spent writing,
Hmm.
and it's you got to find that balance, and it's rough, right? Because it's
Hmm.
I enjoy doing these podcasts, for example. Should I be writing instead? Probably, but these kind of podcasts inform my writing in a way,
That's right, yeah.
but they do kind of leech off that writing time, and that falling
Yeah.
into the zone. And I'm not an outliner at all. I don't like the idea of outlining. I think writing is a mystical experience, and I think it
Yeah.
just you got to be in the zone, and
Hmm.
it's tough, right? I think that at the same time, though, uh, you need to have a scene, right? You got to
Yeah.
build this kind of community, and that's the only way we're going to rise. So what I'm trying to do with this podcast and these
Hmm.
conversations is, rise the tide, raise up the tide, to where there is a associated scene, and there's a cool little, podcast scene going on right now.
Hmm.
A lot of it focused on books and books outside the mainstream, like those guys
Yeah.
that do the book club from hell, and
Yeah.
the art of darkness guys and stuff doing their book club, and everybody's doing their book club, and there's books like The Tower, and your books and everybody's books. And it's really cool to like I've caught myself that I'm just reading books from people on Substack now all the time. That's like the
But
majority of what
my
I'm reading.
TBR is full of books of people on Substack. And actually, I was gonna do a little caveat there a while ago talking about contemporary fiction. There's actually quite a few books on my TBR that are contemporary fiction novels that I've discovered either through you or through other people on Substack, even people
Right,
promoting their own books, right?
right.
And so yeah, I'll be reading some contemporary fiction here pretty soon. That's
Right.
exciting.
Absolutely. All
Yeah.
right, Lisa, thank you for coming on.
Hey,
Uh,
no problem.
Wonderful. You're always welcome back. And if you ever want to join the movie side of the podcast,
Oh,
invite
I
you to
definitely will eventually,
that
one of these
one.
days, for sure.
You got to go watch Lost in Translation, okay? If
Yeah.
you're a film dork, that's a film dork movie. For the
Hmm.
listeners at home, we are, Fisto and I will be back next week like usual. We're going to try to do this every week with, sometimes we're sick or we have work or something. But we try to do it every week. Next week, we have another guest, of course. I need to check to see. I don't remember who it is. I'm like booked until like April right now, which is awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
just constantly booked. I feel like I get a new message for somebody either wanting to be on or being recommended on, so it's
Hmm.
fantastic. And I love the outpouring of support from the community and stuff. The film club, right? The Black Ibis Film Club. It's me and Judy, and because Fisto is too busy to do it, So I enlisted a scab to come join us,
Hmm.
right? And I'm fond of Judy, of course, because she's my wife. So, but we watch movies, and the whole point of the podcast was, hey, this recreates the old coffee shop experience about sitting around talking about things I like. And
Hmm.
one of the other things I did in my life as a married guy is her and I we sit around and watch a lot of movies and then drink beer and talk about it, for hours
Hmm.
afterwards. So like, let's recreate that kind of feeling, but with a microphone. Maybe somebody finds it interesting. I think she brings a very interesting perspective to it, and she stumps me a lot on questions. And we picked her favorite movie. That's like her favorite movie, Lost in Translation. So we started off with that one, but we also watched the first season of White Lotus, and we're going to record an episode just devoted to that season. I'm going to treat it like a movie because it is a 6 episode movie basically. And if you've never watched White Lotus, it is a fantastic HBO show. It's probably one of the best television shows in the last decade. It's right below True Detective in my, esteem, the way I look at it.
Hmm.
Um, and then the newest season, the latest season is currently ongoing. They're releasing like one episode a week. Season 3, we're going to get all the way to that in the next few episodes. The next episode is also going to be a free episode, but we're going to start doing the movie club as one of our paid perks type of thing behind the paywall because listen, guys, you already have something like close to 300 hours of interviews and conversations, and there's gonna be more and more and more content. And I'm gonna put some of it behind the paywall because we have to pay the bills, right? We have to, uh, microphones aren't cheap, internet's not cheap, and time isn't cheap, right? And we love doing it, but we'd also, the more we get money from people, the more we can do it, basically. So we can provide you the quality entertainment for the price of a 6 pack of beer, of cheap beer. Um, so we're going to do that next week. We're going to have another guest and another guest after that. We're going to go through the entirety of the White Lotus, and then I'm open for suggestions of movies. I'm only going to do movies I like. Okay, this is not a review show where I'm like reviewing like the latest movie or whatever. I'm only going to review movies I like or movies that I think need to be discussed or have some kind of contemporary um, import, right? Where like some of the issues, Lost in Translation, in a way really dealt with loneliness in a foreign kind of world, which is very, very pertinent to our today's situation. But it also dealt with a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old in a sort of romantic relationship. And I think that is very interesting in a conversation today, right? And that's why I
Hmm.
really enjoyed that movie. And then what else we're gonna do? We've got some future episodes more focused on certain book reviews and also on it's I have a new series planned, which is going to be called The Dilettante's Guide to Stuff, which is I'm going to pick a topic like a literary scene or like something like Russian literature, and I'm going to give a kind of an introduction to where by the time you're done listening to it, you can talk about it at a party, or if you
Hmm.
read the books I recommend, you can, pretend that you're a professor at a party, basically. And that's kind of the idea of it, right? And the idea is that I think that everybody should be a dilettante when it comes to things, right?
Yeah.
We should be very wide, we should have depth in a lot of things, but we should also be very wide in our understanding of things. So that's kind
Yep.
of what I'm into. I'm into watch all these movies, read all these books, and become a very well-rounded individual, right? A sort of cultural autodictate, I guess, is what I'm trying to
Hmm.
prove. And once again, you're always welcome to come back on, but we talk all the time, so it's cool.
Yeah.
And for listeners at home, what is the best place to buy your book? Where would you say?
Oh, I thought you were hypothetically asking the listeners of the show,
No,
where's the
no,
best?
no. What is the
Duh.
best?
Okay. All right. Well, it's
Oh,
available on Amazon and Kobo. So considering the recent uh whatever with Amazon, you may want to give Kobo a shot. I
all
like
right.
Kobo. I think Kobo is a pretty good service. I've been my first e-reader I got was a Kobo because it's bigger. Kobo's actually bigger in Canada than it is in the States. But yeah, either Amazon or Kobo.
Okay.
If you want the paperback, it's only available through Amazon, but if you want the ebook, you can get it through Kobo or Amazon.
What do
And
you
if
make
you like,
what do you make the most money off of?
they both, oh, sorry, as far as royalties go,
Yeah.
um, let's think about the math. I think I get more from ebooks, but both Kobo and Amazon are they have the same royalties
Okay.
for ebooks. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Okay, so
Hmm.
if you guys are listening and you haven't read Lisa's work, she's got there's three novels out on Amazon right now, including this
Yep.
latest one. Um,
Hmm.
I did a review on Palace. You can go read. We also talked about Palace, and I thought it was a fantastic novel. This current
Hmm.
one is also fantastic, and I will be doing a review in the very near future when I get
Hmm.
around to it because I'm busy. Uh,
Yep.
I really wanted. I was going to do it today, and I thought it would be in bad taste. I'm like, I can't review a book while the guest is on. That just that's just
Yeah.
not that I'm going to say anything bad
This,
about it, but
yeah.
it just kind it's kind of weird, you
Yeah.
know. I was like, ah, it's
Yeah.
maybe not the best thing, kind of an autistic thing to do.
Yeah.
Um,
I always feel stumped as like, okay, so what the book just came out yesterday. So obviously I can't talk too much about it
right,
because the majority of the people on the planet have not read the book.
right. That's how I
So,
was.
yeah.
That's why I felt when I was doing the notes because I was like, oh shit, it came out yesterday, but I got it like
Hmm.
2 weeks ago or
Yeah,
whatever.
you got an advanced copy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, I can't really talk about it really, but I can talk about it. It's great. Go buy it, right? But
Hmm.
Palace, I can absolutely talk about because I have
Yeah, it's been up out for a
read a
while.
review and we know we've recorded it and
Hmm.
it's got mushrooms in it and it's awesome.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, so anyways, thank you, Lisa.
no problem.
We'll
Thanks for
talk
having me on.
soon. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Fans of science fiction, weird science fiction, Sword and Planet, Twilight
And
Zone, Star Trek, all kinds of stuff. Jack Vance, go ahead and listen, read Lisa's stuff.
mhm.
And for the rest of you guys, remember that if you go to bed, good dreams and good night. See you next week.
Nighty night.